Welcome to episode number 12 of Shockwaves. I'm one of your hosts, Rob Galluzzo. Sitting with me is the editor-in-chief of Blumhouse.com and a lady I call boss sometimes.
You really
No, you don't.
McKendry.
No one calls
never.
me that.
That was the first time I called her boss ever.
It felt good, Rob. It felt real good.
Did it? You feel fancy now?
Yeah.
Someone that definitely will never call you boss is Elric Kane.
Come on, Elric. Give me some love in
I think
here.
I'm capable of calling you boss, but I will say this. When you get your PhD, I'm going to call you Doc forever. Like, I'm never calling you Bekah
Really?
again, ever.
I just
You
want
will be Doc.
Just one day. Because I'm in my
Doctor,
final
Doc.
semester right now, and I keep saying, after I finish, I'm going to have one night where I get so completely drunk, like I can't make words that night. And then the next day, I want everyone to call me doctor. And then
can't wait
that's
for
going
that
to be
to
it.
happen.
Because the
I've
drinking
never-
game in the old days of Killer Pivia was like if you were mentioning doing your thesis, but now you're done. The drinking
I'm
game
not
takes
done
over.
yet. It's the last semester. So.
All right,
Here we go.
And she's going to get drunk. I've never seen that before.
I know. You guys will be there, and it will be
When's that
amazing.
happening?
This is my last semester of my PhD, so it'll be in
Can I
December.
be at that party?
Yes,
Thank
of
you.
course you will. It will
And
be in my
That
backyard.
was kind of creepy, Turek.
That mysterious.
Can I
Her
be
getting
at
drunk
that
and you
party?
jumping in there.
Oh, I didn't see
man.
it as that way. No, I've
You're like
known
an
Bekah
80s
for
villain,
years.
yo.
I've never seen Bekah just like get loose and
I never
crazy.
did.
Getting
Public.
loose. You want Rebekah
Oh,
to get what?
Jesus Christ.
Oh my lord! No,
Have you ever seen Elric get loose? It's terrifying.
They've seen video
Restraining
of me.
orders are put in place.
I've seen
whiskey.
Elric drunk so many times.
I don't know if you've seen me drunk at that level.
Oh, man. Well, by
Rob
the way,
has.
I've
our
seen
final-
you when you get quote
Also, hello.
charming.
Hello. So yeah, our last co-host, Ryan Turek, is here. Everybody, can we call him
Hi.
Chief? Is that what he is to us? Chief?
You weren't here last week. That's a bummer. I wish we had
He
done a
was.
show with you last week.
Sort of.
No, I'm
Well, he
kidding.
was
I'm
kind of
kidding.
here.
The missing
Lost
lights
the
out
ether.
review, guys.
It's been busy. It's been a busy time for us here at Blumhouse.
That's right. So we have quite a show for you
Yeah.
later on. We're going to be talking to Fede Alvarez, director of the Evil Dead remake
And we already know it's a good interview.
and Don't Breathe. We can guarantee
that is
it.
guaranteed.
It's
Guaranteed.
a good discussion. He really gets into like, it's not unusual for a filmmaker to kind of tell where they're coming from, but like his guard was down. Not his guard was down, but he was open and honest.
candid.
He was candid.
Very candid. And,
Very much so. And that was like
Well, he,
like
didn't,
a lot
and he
of
didn't show up to do promo. He showed up to talk about movies with us.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what we were talking
Yeah.
about on the way out. He was like, you know what, I'm really glad that I was able to just kind of like be able to cut loose and talk openly about film because, I'm coming up on the Don't Breathe junket and I only get 5 minutes at a time. And we've all been on that junket circuit, where you literally get 3 minutes to sit outside. You sit outside a hotel room door and you wait to go inside. And when you go inside, you're ducking lights, you're ducking publicists. You sit in a chair. They go, "This is Ryan Turek from shock2drop.com." And then you go like, "You got 3 minutes on the clock. Go." And you're like,
3 minutes.
What the hell am I gonna like? I can't.
You get one question, and usually the talent will just recite the same thing over and over.
They've
Like
got
I
it,
was,
yeah, they've got it
I was
worked.
And that's
doing
what
one
drives them
with
nuts, yeah.
I was doing one with Corey Feldman for I think it was like the Lost Boys sequel or something like that, where I literally heard him finish with the person before me, and then I went in and he just started from the beginning and recited the whole thing, and I was like, so why not just send it out in a paragraph,
Such a
guys?
turn
Save
off.
me the day.
But anyways, I mean, like the conversation was great. It
Yeah,
was,
and I think I
Very
did that with
casual.
Fede 3 times on Evil Dead, where I literally walked in the room and had to do a 3-minute thing with him. And this is much, much different and much cooler.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've got stuff that we've seen, but the one thing that a lot of our listeners have been asking us about, we briefly mentioned it 2 weeks ago. Obviously, the big thing is Stranger Things, which popped up on Netflix. At the time, I'd only watched I think the first one because I really wanted to savor and make this thing last, but I've since finished it, and I think everyone has.
unlike me, who devoured it in an entire day.
Oh, yeah,
I
you
had 2
invited me.
days
He did
on
the
me.
day.
I did it at 9 a.m. I cooked a nice breakfast. You missed
Right.
a nice breakfast, Rob G. I cooked some pancakes.
See, I
cooked some cheesy eggs.
I didn't want to do
We
the whole
had
thing
some
one day, man.
mimosas.
Mimosas?
And then I broke out. Here's the special part. I broke out an air mattress.
Oh,
Whoa.
Laid it out on the floor.
You're getting creepier.
Is this a sexy Stranger
You watch all the movies like
Things?
And so, we did it from I think think we started around 9:15. We wrapped up around 5:30 or so.
Wow.
Went straight into some Kama Sutra. Keep the party rolling. Put on some Sting.
Obviously,
I'm getting creepier. Jesus.
well, I'm curious how. I mean, obviously, all of us saw it. I think all of us liked it, right?
Let me talk about this. There was a Thing poster from
1980.
This is
Shut
a
up,
great thing
Kane.
about talking about it from a perspective, because now we're kind of like distanced from that first week's release. We've gone from everybody going, Stranger Things is so great. Oh my God, I love it too. I'm really kind of concerned about what the messaging was on this episode and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, guys, come on.
No, that's what I just said to Rob before this started, because somebody was bitching about how seeing the Thing poster takes them out of the show because they think it's like false nostalgia. And I'm like, the only thing I can say to that is, if that takes you out of a show, you didn't like the show anyway. So who cares about the Thing? Like, that's being made by people. It's a different kind of nostalgia. They're creating an 80s nostalgia piece in a sense, which is taking things that aren't necessarily realistic, but you're creating a world. And the way I felt about the series, the reason why I love the series is it made me feel something every episode that actually did make me, like you, want to savor it a little more. I watched, I think, 2 a night, but I loved the feeling of watching it.
Yeah,
There's heart.
There's heart.
There's
heart to
hearts.
it.
Yeah.
And that is so critical to like every series that you get into. If you're not feeling that heart in the first episode, you explore the second and third episode maybe, and then if you realize it's not for you, you're out. First episode, you're all in. Like you have to be a cold-hearted bastard to not feel something in the show. You know?
And I've seen people post, and I think they're cold-hearted bastards. But what was it like for you to because you just did the whole thing in one shot?
Well, it was like reading a book.
Oh,
That's the beauty of it. It was like reading a book, because then you were able to kind of like, in between each episode was like a chapter. So you were like, it was literally like the series. You were like, okay, I'm going to take a break, take a breather for a minute, digest what I just saw, and then kind of go into it. And like the thing is, I see a lot of people kind of bashing it for its influences and stuff like that. And again, my argument is like, it's got heart and it's got smarts. And we've seen so many filmmakers repurpose and reutilize a lot of their nostalgia and channel it into movies that are highly like unoriginal, like, just highly unoriginal, and we're wearing their influences on their sleeve, unlike, Stranger Things, which I feel like it wears its influences on its sleeve, but it does it for its own purpose. It has its own voice, at least.
And if Stephen King
and
tweets...
Tarantino does that as well. Like, let's not forget, Tarantino does that
No,
so
but
much.
Stephen King tweeted himself that this feels like a classic hits of Stephen King, but that's a good thing when he sees it for what it is. He got it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's definitely what did it to me, because I've said it on past shows that we've done. I despise movies that are like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, I'm just going to put a poster of my favorite film in the background, and it's just going to hang there so everybody knows I love this film. But this, even though it had those moments, it also had the substance and the tones that were there in the 1980s.
Sincerity.
Like,
It was sincerely of the time. And it's funny because, again, Elric and I were talking about it before we even started the show, how people's complaints were things about, not ringing true to the 80s or the time period. And this is funny because as soon as I finished the show, the 2 movies I watched just by coincidence, I went back and watched E.T., which obviously takes a huge influence from it. But, this is the 30th anniversary of Stand By Me, which was written by King. Yeah. And I watched that, and I think to myself, I was like, well, nobody was complaining like, well, these kids aren't authentically from 1959, but you just buy it because there's sincerity to that piece as well. So I loved it. It felt like an unreleased King novel from the late 80s that didn't,
And the casting's the other thing.
Yeah,
that I
the
think
kids are great.
It has the heart. It's all the casting. There's nothing like being proven wrong with the film, but when I first saw the sheriff, the first scene, the first thing that went through my mind is, I don't really like this actor, and that's a bummer, because he just popped up. He's just saying about him. I'd seen him in other roles. I didn't like him. He's one of those guys that maybe like Bradley Cooper had the asshole thing. And by the end of it, easily my favorite character of the entire year. And that shows how a role for an actor is a transcendent thing. Like kind of like what Fede will talk about in the future. But seeing an actor become something that you then completely love, now that actor is a different human to me. And that's a really powerful thing about movies and TV, and
you will sigh when you see him in Suicide Squad.
Oh, he's in that one too.
I like that guy. But he's in this.
The good news, Rob. I've got good news for you. I might never see Suicide. So there you go.
So my amusing Stranger Things story before we move on. So I was so excited right afterwards that I told my parents. I was like, "You guys have to see Stranger Things." My mom I'll call a peripheral science fiction fan. And so I figure, you know, she really loves Stephen King and she loves sci-fi. So I was like, you know what, this will probably be good for her. And I gave my mom has been using my Netflix and Hulu accounts, which are totally new to her. And she's 70 now. So it's definitely like, you know, she's new to this. And I told her, and I was like, it's on Netflix, Stranger Things, go watch it. And then I left to go to Canada for Fantasia. And I come back and I pull up my Hulu and Netflix accounts. And you know how it'll show you, like, recently you have viewed. So one, I discovered that my mom viewed Human Centipede, which is just in itself crazy. And she was like, I didn't really get it. And I'm like, that's probably best, Mom. But then I discovered that instead of viewing the Stranger Things on Netflix.
Wait, what's there to get? Ass to mouth. What else is there? That movie is not a complicated movie. Would you have to come to your mother's house?
She got that part.
Okay,
she got that part.
What else is there?
She did.
Dr.
She was
Dieter?
questioning like why you would do that, and I was like, it really doesn't matter in the movie. That's not
different strokes for different
yeah.
folks.
But so I'm also looking, and then I'm like, oh God, did she watch this? And she watched Stranger Things the movie on Hulu, which is a 2013 British story about a confused young woman looking for herself in the world who makes friends with a young homeless boy, and together they travel the English countryside.
and in fairness, it's actually better. You know, it's really good.
I had completely forgotten about it, and then the next morning she comes in and she goes, I watched Stranger Things while you were gone. This doesn't seem like your type of movie, Bekah. I didn't really like it, to be honest. I was like, oh my God.
About?
Maybe that's what all the haters were watching. They're all like, maybe that just happens to have a Thing poster in it too.
Right.
What was the chances?
So amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what'd you guys see? Let's dive right in.
I only watched one thing, so I will start. So I watched La Cita. I do not know how to say it correctly,
Probably
so I'm going to call it
Cita.
Devil's Daughter. It's also known as The Sect, and I think it's actually also a Demon sequel. But this is the same guy who did...
That one's not a Demon sequel.
I'm pretty sure it's Demons 4.
No, Demons 4 is a really, really horrendous... They put out something called Demons 4 once that had that horrendous...
Is this Demons the
cover.
Ogre? Which one's the Ogre?
No. I am
That's
90%.
either 3. I think that's 3.
Hold on.
The Ogre,
Oh,
and that's
I'm
terrible. Well, I mean, the story
sure
has nothing
that
to
this
do
is-
with Demons.
No.
at
But
all,
I
so-
am relatively sure that this one was also marketed as Demons 4, which
Really?
I
Listen,
will
well,
figure this out.
but it has nothing to do
momentarily.
with it.
No,
I mean,
it's got jack shit to do with Demons 4. But yeah, it's directed by, I'm going to say his name wrong, Michele Soavi.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, I did?
Well,
okay.
Michelle, yeah, it's the director of Del Monte.
Yeah, Del Monte. He also did
Church.
Stage Fright.
He appeared in Demons.
Yeah.
He was,
He
the
was
guy with the mountain.
Argento's assistant for years.
Well, and Argento produced this one.
Yeah.
So this was after Stage Fright. This was like his next big project that he did. And the plot, well, it's very much more true to like an Italian horror film in the sense of like Fulci, where it's very disjointed and dreamlike, and you really have no idea. And there are scenes that you're like, I don't even understand why that scene was there. I mean, it kind of looked cool, but I have no idea why it was there. And the whole plot of it is this woman hits an old man with her car, brings him home like you do, and decides to try to like let him sleep on her couch. And he does some weird shit to her in the middle of the night, and somehow she gets knocked up with the devil's kid, and she's about to give birth to the Antichrist.
Sounds legit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she has this pet bunny. And the bunny watches television, like pulls the remote down and like watches television. And she named it Rabbit, and she has a fish, which she calls Fish. And then they discover that there's actually like this manhole cover in her basement that leads down to this waterway where I guess is where the devil lives. And the whole thing is just this absolute dream. Like it's like if you picture all this in Fulci terms, you go, oh, that makes total sense. It somehow makes total sense in this. And at the same time, it's got this very kind of anti-hippie vibe because it opens on this scene of like, I guess it's supposed to be like back in the 60s. All of these hippies like having this crazy mad love fest cookout in the desert. And then this guy comes up and is like, I'm hungry. Can I eat with you cats? And he does. And then he kills them all. And then nothing else to do with that scene except that guy kind of comes back as Jesus or the devil. I don't know. But beautifully shot.
Yeah, it's a cool
Gorgeous
film. Yeah, I
looking.
like that film a lot. But it is disjointed. It is stranger than some of his other films. And then he made The Church, and then he kind of got out of the film business due to a tragedy that happened to his family.
Yeah.
And I think I'd heard rumblings that he was coming back into
yeah.
the film
You're
industry.
talking about
now.
Michelle?
Michelle, he lost his son at one
I
point.
did not know that.
That's why he withdrew. So he was on a
Interesting.
high point of his career
well,
when
yeah,
that
yeah,
happened.
yeah.
And he-
Oh my God, I didn't know
yeah,
that.
it's a really
Yeah.
awful story.
Yeah.
Because I remember there was a point where he was going to make that quote unquote comeback, and He was talking about another Della Morte film. He was talking about doing something with Nicolas Cage, like an Italian horror movie.
Whoa.
And yeah. There was a bunch of different rumblings of like what his next directorial effort was going to be. I just didn't know about that. That's tragic. It's terrible.
Yeah. But I think stylistically, he the problem. A lot of people ape the style of people like Argento and that, but because he rose up through working with them, it feels much more organic. And I think he's kind of like the last of those directors.
Yeah.
He was the youngest.
He was like he took what Argento was doing and who he was learning from and processed it and made it his own.
Yeah.
He
Cemetery
developed
Man is
his
original.
Cemetery Man. You look at it and there's a lot of stuff that's going on in there that's uniquely him.
And Stage Fright feels like one of the traditional giallo films, but it's definitely got kind of a filter that it's worked through, and it's very updated. Yeah. Well, I mean, 80s updated, but it still feels much different than the originals in that regard. But all the original elements are there.
Guys, where do I get an owl head? I want to be the.
You want to be the Stage Fright?
That would be an amazing Halloween costume.
That's what I've been trying to figure out. Is like what I'm going to do for Halloween, and then
I
keep coming to that. Who wants to make it for me, guys?
I'll just carry around a fan and feathers, so they're constantly raining down.
And if you can give me some things to jump off of, and
I was gonna say,
do a
you
got
to come to the room dancing if you're going to do that costume, man.
I was watching when I watched that movie Stage Fright a couple of weeks ago, I watched the bonus features, the making of, which is absolutely amazing because there's that scene at the end. It's like the climactic scene where the key to her freedom, to the door to the outside, is wedged through the theater floor, and she's trying to pry it out. They actually had to make like a 6-foot-long key because it had to go from the ceiling to the floor, and they couldn't do it any other way.
That's amazing.
So it was like the coolest thing because they show it from the side, and you're like, that is a huge fucking key. So yeah. It was really cool.
I think the church is meant to be Demons 3.
That's right.
And then Demons 4 Ogre is the most abysmal piece of shit I've ever seen.
I just pulled this up to prove it, but Devil's Daughter is Demons 4.
Oh, so
in
maybe
some parts of the world.
In some parts.
Because the ogres.
This is some Dead Right Horror Trivia Night nonsense.
This might be controversial.
Everybody listening.
Collins and Williamson are going to call us up in school.
If you're an Italian listener, we don't know if we have any, but if you are, we want to hear from you.
This is a Brian Collins article in the making.
Yeah,
he did like an Evil Dead article about the 10 movies they made with
bring them on
all
board.
the different Evil Dead.
So
then the other thing that I did this weekend, which was not a movie but still awesome, is I was at Scare LA most of the weekend.
Did it hold up? Because I know they fractioned, the two festivals fractioned, and I read a lot of people saying, "Oh, this one's not as good," or "This one's not as good." Do they?
There was definitely some division, but I didn't go to Scare LA, but I did go.
I heard Midsummer Scream was awesome.
Midsummer Scream was great.
Yeah.
It was great. It was a great turnout, great venue.
That's not the Scare LA is the one you
Scare
went to.
LA. Scare LA was the original. Then some faction of
people who started left.
Yeah, Scare LA was still great. I didn't go to Midsummer Scream, but we had a Blumhouse panel there, which I heard was awesome, that Greg Burkhart did with John Humphrey, and they discussed like creepypastas and urban legends.
But for those who don't know, the Scare LA is more of a haunts thing.
Well, somewhat.
Halloween industry,
Somewhat, I will say, because like I do all of the haunted house like industry festivals, and those are things like Trans World or Haunt World or East Coast Haunters Con. This is much more of like it's geared towards the public. It's still haunted houses, but it's not a haunt industry show as much as it is haunted houses geared towards the public, if that makes sense. So yeah, it was a little weird. And so like when I was talking to some of the haunted house vendors, they were like, yeah, this is like our fan show that we do. It's not an industry show. Which kind of like Monsterpalooza, but for the haunted house world. But they cover everything. I mean, there was a huge vendor room this year. They had a bug zoo. Yeah, like bugs and snakes and stuff. They had a whole bunch of mazes set up there, which I think Rob got to go through. I didn't go through any of the mazes.
There were too many lines this year.
Yeah, it was packed. I will say that. Like Saturday when we were there, I had a panel and we had the Blumhouse booth. It was packed. And then I went back on Sunday and took Marnie and Strummer, and it was a little less then, but it was still like really, really good turnout for it. So yeah, it was fun. They had
fun event.
Yeah, they had all types of stuff. They actually have a thing called Scare School going on now, too, where they have classes going on throughout the weekend, and you sign up and you take, like, pick your electives. And so you can learn, like, tombstone cutting or special effects or how to light your yard or make creepy noises. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on. So, and it always marks kind of my entrance to Halloween because right after I went there and did this, on the way home, I stopped by the grocery store and they had candy corn out. And then I was like,
I saw Ryan posting some photos of Halloween stuff out and about. Where was that?
Michael's.
As soon as Michael's has it up, that's when it's real because it smells like cinnamon.
If any Shockwaves listeners live in the Los Angeles area, get your ass to Michael's in Burbank at the Empire Center because apparently this Michael's has the largest selection of Halloween stuff that's currently out. And there is some great stuff. And I'm gonna show a sensitive side to Turek, maybe a not so gore, over the top, scary horror guy, Turek, but kind of in love with those silly little fucking ceramic haunted houses with like the little figurines and the lights that go. And
I have a whole bunch of those for the longest. They're called the Lemax.
I do it every year. I look at that thing, and Anthony Massey has like the largest collection in it, like I've ever seen in his house. And every year I see him like break it out, and he like dedicates a whole like drawing table, and it's just like little. Like these little scenes. And this, I bought my first piece, guys.
Whoa.
We have a couple.
It's a Halloween countdown clock. And it's amazing. Nice.
No, we have a couple. They're called the Lemax Village.
Yeah.
And so Dave and I, we still have a number, but we had a ton at one point because on our wedding, because we got married on Halloween, somebody gave us the theater. And it was like
cool.
this like ghost theater, and there's ghosts going past the windows. Yeah, it lights up, it plays music and everything. It's awesome. Yeah. And then from then out, my parents kept giving us another one every year. As we'd have an anniversary. And then like in no time we had like 13 of them, and we were moving to New York or LA, and we were like, we can't take these with us. So we sold some of them. The rest of them are in my parents' attic, and we still have the theater one that sits in our living room.
I will buy your wedding present.
Yeah. When it's this hot, I can't think of it. For me now, it's actually Beyond Fest. When that one kicks in, I'm like, oh, cool. The horror movies, I'm getting close to. Something about the summer in LA.
But it never cools down. It's this hot in October here.
No, but there's just something about summer that it really isn't.
Well, this weekend, not to talk about weather on a podcast, but it was like a little cooler. It was like almost 81.
Let's just go. It's like the weather.
But I was going to say, going back to the Lemax stuff, they actually made, for the collectors out there, they made a New Line series. So there was a Crystal Lake vignette. There was a Haddonfield one. There was like the Myers house.
Yeah, John Squires wrote about it on the website.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of them. If you could find them, then good luck to you. Yeah. Send them to me.
Well, what'd you see, Ryan?
I saw two movies. I went to go to the CGV cinemas on Western to go see Train to Busan.
I'm going tomorrow.
It is awesome.
Is it? I can't wait.
It is awesome. It's
I've heard it's really cool.
It's at a thankfully it's at a brisk 2 hours as opposed to most Korean cinema, which is like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes.
It was
that was definitely
but if you guys don't know what the Train to Busan it's about a father, a businessman who is bringing his daughter to Busan to be reunited with her mother for they're like a divorced couple. She wants to see her mom for the weekend. So he's like, all right, I'll take you into town. They get on the train and a zombie outbreak occurs. And it's like pure like event cinema. Like it's pure summer movie cinema. Because then,
so excited now.
The passengers get broken up into factions. There's like a train car full of zombies. There are rules to the zombies and how to get around them. And then of course there's dividing lines amongst the passengers that occur, from the rich, the wealthy and the poor to, there's this one dude in it. I keep forgetting his name. He is so badass. He's so awesome. And
it's breaking records in Korea.
Breaking records in Korea.
Which is great.
Kind of going into it, you're like, as a cynic who's seen so many zombie movies, you can go and go, okay, what you got? Like zombies on a train. Okay, what do you have beyond that? Mm-hmm. And what they do on a character level, I'll admit, like made me shed a little tear at the end because it's like super emotional. Cool. And it's nothing new, but it's so rooted in a really great character arc. And, they kind of play with, the usual Romero kind of archetypes. So, you can go, okay, that's that moment. I got it. Okay, that's that character. I got it. We've seen that. That's cool. And then when it comes to the zombies, it's like the rules are fantastic. Like the rules are really, really cool. And you get to see some epic World War Z style zombie stuff that you've never seen on screen before. So it's cool. It's a lot of fun.
Wow, this sounds like very large scale.
It's huge. It's a big blockbuster movie. You know, it's a big
do you
budget.
think people, because this is such a specialized theater in LA, because it's actually a South Korean theater, do you think this is going to play other avenues across America?
No, probably not. No,
Really, it's not that kind of. Even though it's hard to believe given that it's breaking records. And
yeah,
I was thinking maybe it'd be a crossover.
Well,
No,
I think I already
don't.
heard remake rights or something.
Yeah,
Didn't somebody post
Fox
about it?
Fox was apparently going to do, or it was either Fox or Warner Brothers were in contention for the rights. And then I think Will Go USA is going to put it out.
Oh,
I think
okay.
they have the
Yeah.
rights, so they'll put it out on
do
Blu-ray
a
and
great
DVD.
job. Cool.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're in a major city, then see if you can find it. You know,
I could
locally.
imagine maybe Draft House in the Austin.
Yeah,
I could
yeah,
imagine
maybe,
them
yeah.
picking it up. But
Man, Welga's been up in their
Will's
game
good,
lately.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they got
Yeah.
the Phantasm franchise.
Yeah.
That's
which is
right.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, they do all the Korean
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
and now they've got Phantasm.
Yeah, because
cool.
they did the whaling too.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And then the other thing I watched is Scream Factory's Invasion of the Body Snatchers Blu-ray.
Oh yeah,
And,
that's
Nice.
and that movie is just
freaking
like,
smart.
it's funny because there's a film that I'm getting ready to work on, and I was texting the director and I was like sending him screenshots of just the cinematography, and it's just like they don't shoot movies like that anymore. It's just like hard lighting, you know, big shadows, really sinister framing. You
also
know? And it's
adult horror with adult actors,
Yes.
and celebrity adult actors. Things
Yes,
I was
yeah,
never
yeah.
seen
Yeah.
outside of now.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
in a way, Conjuring and stuff.
But I mean, like that movie, the movie holds up magnificently. It's one of my favorites of all time.
yeah, I think it's
like
top three.
Oh, absolutely!
It's
so
like Flying Thing. It's really on par.
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
on par. But they're all
it's
fantastic.
really good. But also seeing like the who you're talking about, like the celebrity actors, Jeff Goldblum,
Yeah.
and
Playing
Donald
real
Sutherland, and
Leonard Nimoy,
Yeah.
is creepy.
That's right.
I haven't seen the Scream Factory release, but I'm excited to see it because I think it's a great movie.
Yeah. Brooke Adams.
Yeah,
from
Brooke
Black
Adams
Swan,
is just
great
yeah.
in it.
yeah,
Gorgeous.
yeah.
Which, by the way, the Korean movie you mentioned, it's called in Train to Busan.
Train to Busan. Yeah,
That fits I mentioned this a few episodes ago. It fits my game that I have with Mike C from Icons of Fright, which is it a Korean movie title or a Morrissey song title?
Ooh.
So, Train to Busan. Korean movie.
That's funny.
But anyways, and the Scream Factory Blu-ray looks really great too. So
Yeah, I just got that. I haven't delved into the features yet because that's one that has been put out already on
Yeah.
Blu-ray, and I own the previous edition. But you know what? With Scream, like with Texas Chainsaw 2 and some of the stuff they've been doing, they've Army Darkness, and most recently Return of the Living Dead. They've been really putting out like a reason to upgrade
I've been
it.
really trying to be really good because I was listening to the previous episode of Shockwaves when you guys were talking about your shelves that you have to go to of like stuff you haven't watched.
Yeah.
So I created a shelf.
Oh,
Yeah.
The new,
Instead of just
arrivals shelf.
instead of shuffling everything just into the collection and then
You'll
hoping for
forget
the
about it.
best.
Because otherwise I forget.
Yeah,
And
so
then,
I now have that. And over the weekend, I had a kind of a nice weekend to just chill out for a second. And I went through the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, all of it, like special
Great.
features, everything.
stuff in
And it
there.
was great. It was really cool.
Yeah,
really
I
cool.
only have two places I head now when I'm like, oh, I've got like 2 hours. What do I watch? I go to my shelf and then I have another queue that I keep a watch list on Amazon. And even if it's something I want to see on Netflix, I always keep it on Amazon because that's where I just head. So
I prefer to go to Rob's. Just go there and pick something off his rental list.
Well, what did you see, Elric?
I saw The Boogeyman by Ulli Lommel. Waiting for
I
crickets.
have that record.
Really?
The soundtrack
Really?
to that. Yeah,
Actually, no,
the
actually,
record's good.
Yeah,
Actually,
the record's
no,
great.
actually, the soundtrack was Ulli Lommel was very famous for making hundreds of movies and none of them being pretty good, very
Except
good.
Boogeyman's okay, if I remember
It's okay.
correctly.
Yeah,
he's
I don't
actually
remember it
famous
being
for being an
bad.
actor from Fassbinder movies. So, like back in
Really?
Germany, then he moved to America and made these movies. He made Tenderness of the Wolves, which is Criterion, an actually interesting film. This film, I wanted to see it because there's something in the gimmick, something we're writing. There's something in the gimmick where a boogeyman comes through the mirror. So basically, it's not even a boogeyman; it's a misnomer. It's actually there's their mom's boyfriend is playing some kinky game with the mom and ties up the son so he can to a bed so he's not going to interrupt them. And they basically go in to have sex. The sister comes and cuts the son loose. They go into the room and the son stabs him to death. He then his spirit or whatever is trapped or whatever the entity is in this mirror in the house. And when she shatters the mirror years later, even if one little piece of the mirror gets anywhere, it starts to glow and invisible. creature comes at you. You never see the thing. It's just something, but you can see him if you look in the mirror. And it's really not very good, but the moments of the conceit are kind of fun. But he's a terrible director with actors. I mean, it's just, it was a bit of a slog. And this was through
hang on a second, back up. So what prompts you to watch
make it a boogeyman
to make
night.
it a boogeyman night?
You're a family man. Your shelf?
You've got some quiet hours.
Let me just put this. I'm making some pancakes. I get the inflatable mattress. Hey, what are you gonna do? I know Turek's coming over.
You know what? Yeah, but I have company.
That's okay. I always have company. I don't know. I can't get rid of them. I would trade any day with you. No, it was really the conceit of trying to figure out new ways. But to be honest, this doesn't spoil anything. Always trying to come up with new ways to bring boogeyman into movies, because there's so many, do things come through the closet? Do they come in the door? And so everyone out there who's sitting there writing horror movies, which there's hundreds of you out there listening to this. So I remember just the memory of something to do with a mirror came up, and I was like, and then it didn't pay off. It was not worth it. But I will say this: I went to Amazon Prime, and it's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen these. It's, how you get streaming on Netflix, and it's streaming, and it's also this is streaming from somebody's fucking VHS somewhere in the world. Somebody had to push play on their VHS for me to watch this piece of shit movie. I couldn't believe it. It was literally square.
Somebody sitting in
marks. I was like, what the fuck?
Somebody's sitting in a room, and they look, and a username comes up on their screen, and they're like, Elric Kane.
Yeah.
All right, hang on a second.
I like to think of it as God. Somewhere God pushes play so I can watch Boogeyman.
There's a couple of movies.
It's probably Ulli Lommel.
There's a few movies I've streamed off Amazon that have been that same quality. I think I may have even paid to rent this one, but Torso, when I got that one off Amazon.
Oh, that was off there? Oh, that's
I
a bummer,
was seriously
that's
this is
nice
a
blue.
fourth generation, but I paid $1 for it, so I have to keep watching.
So that wasn't exactly worth it, but I will say the thing some of you will remember about that film is it has a really good cover. It has a great image of a preacher holding up a cross and his face is melting. That scene's badass. I watched a triple feature with Brian Sauer. These I'll go through quick because you don't need to hear me talk too much about the first couple. Roar. Finally saw it.
Oh, man.
And I got to say, it is an experience. I didn't love the movie, but man, the experience of watching something where there's an actor acting and suddenly a line just knocks him over and it wasn't part of the narrative, you're like, oh shit. Yeah. And then one scene, the guy is fine. The next scene, he's got a bandage with blood on it. And you're like, oh fuck. And he's the director? Oh shit. It's really entertaining on that level. But the music, I would love somebody to do this. The music is goofy Disney gone wrong music. It's really silly soundtrack. If you replace that with a horror score, the movie would be flat out terrifying. I mean, it is like a Disney gone wrong movie anyway. You're like, oh, it's a Disney movie, and here comes a panther. Where does Tippi Hedren had her leg broken by the elephant when it raises her up? I'm just like, this is a $17 million home movie. It's insanity. So,
I'm still trying to figure out how they pitched that because
they didn't. They took their own money. $17 million. They made a home movie.
But at some point, she would have said, "Hey guys, I have all of these lions."
No. She's the star. Her husband's the director and the star, and all the other actors are her kids.
Yeah,
including Melanie Griffith. It is a family movie. It's very bizarre.
Didn't one of the kids try to show it to you years ago?
Yeah, I know. A friend of mine was dating her son, and and I was up at his house, and he's like, "You ever see Roar?" And I was like, yeah, when I was a kid. And he's like, well, here's the soundtrack. And he goes, and here's the DVD. And he's like, let me show you the scar. And he lifted up the back of his hair, and there's this giant scar that comes around the back of his skull. It was amazing. But what's weird is I went to Tippi Hedren's cat sanctuary, the wild animal sanctuary out just outside of Los Angeles.
It still exists?
It does. Wow. It does. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And what's great is walking around it and going, oh, I recognize this area. Yeah. Seeing the different spots. It's really cool.
It's pretty wild. And I would recommend, thank you to Brian Sauer from Rupert Pupkin, who sent us all copies for some, I don't know if he sent you.
Oh, yeah, he did a while ago.
He did. It was a while back, so I only just watched this. I want to thank him for that. Second, you know our good friends at Scream Factory. We love you, and we just said something really nice about Invasion of the Body Snatchers. A first Elric hater moment. You're not going to like it. I could not stand their new film, Bite.
Oh,
okay.
And
I didn't.
We watched Bite. Me and Dick. Dick was very excited about it. Here's the problem, Bite. The Fly exists. And this movie is beat for beat, second for second. Everything about it is aping and ripping off a movie. This, to me, was in the John Carpenter, what that legal thing we just had with BUSAN.
Oh, yeah.
What is the
Lockout,
where he escaped from New York, has so many similarities. I felt that way about this and Fly, except the one that matters, where you like the characters. The characters in this were so unlikable that it makes everything detestable from the start. But other than that, it's beat for beat, and it drove me honestly, it drove me crazy. It has some good effects. It's shot pretty well, but it was just not for me. And so I hate hating on movies, but this one actually really
positivity, man. Positivity.
It irked me. Somebody out there is going to love it. It's somebody's favorite movie.
And it was, once the effects started in, it was really good. But I had the same problem at the beginning where it was just the girls on, I guess it was their bachelorette weekend or something. And it was very kind of Girls Gone Wild. And I swear at one point someone said, "Oh my God, we're going to go crazy tonight." It was very
here's my problem.
Of standard.
Filmmakers, listen, if you're going to have a film that is all about a bite, and you have your character go, "Oh, something just bit me," and that was the fucking big moment of your movie. In the first few minutes, you don't even see the thing. It's just, "Oh, something bit me."
They show the eggs.
No, but a character has to say, "Oh, something bit me." It's something underwater you don't even see. I'm like, this is a medium where you show us. You don't tell me, and I really hated that about it. So it pissed me off. I'm sorry, filmmakers who listen to this podcast.
I did think it had some.
Now just defriended me on.
Just to add the positivity, I was annoyed by some of the language at the beginning, and I felt like the characters were a little wonky at the beginning. But as soon as the effects kicked in, I was like 100% there.
Okay.
I actually thought that like as soon as the bite actually started getting like really gross, then I was like, oh well, this will keep me going. So it did.
If you don't care
fun
about
there.
story or character but effects.
Yeah. No, but I will say, keep going. Like when you first started, I thought it was found footage, and had that continued, I would have turned it off. But I liked that it did go to a narrative.
There was a comment by me where at the start with found footage, I'm like, oh God, found footage. 30 minutes later, I kind of missed that found footage. That's never great stuff.
I believe the filmmaking team and the producing team are they're out of Canada, and they did a movie called The Drownsman, and they're basically a collective up in Montreal, I think, or just outside, and they just constantly churn out horror movies. They're constantly going, constantly busy. You know,
I couldn't tell. Anyway, apologies for hating. Let's turn to something positive. I broke out my Twilight Time. It's been sitting on since we had Twilight Time, Nick Redman in studio on our old show. A lot of people always complain because they only make 1,000 copies and they cost a lot. Of the Blob, worth every cent you could possibly spend. I'm not even kidding. If I didn't own this right now, I probably would spend $60 on it if I knew it was never coming out again. Because this movie, the first 2/3 of this movie are actually, I think, a great movie, not just great effects. I actually think it is really, I mean, Kevin Dillon's hair aside. I think this is a beautiful film. I think
Dillon hair was
the hair
awesome.
Happened. I mean,
the hair happened.
The hair was a thing.
Russell,
we were all part of it.
But
and,
early 90s, when did the movie come out? Like 90s?
No, it was
88.
80s.
Okay, 80s, late 80s.
The effects
hair
are
was
mind-blowing. Effects are mind-blowing. The film is awesome. I'll tell you one funny anecdote. Everyone will remember the scene where the creepy guy is in the car with the girl, and he basically is like about to make out with her, but she's asleep when he comes back or too drunk, and he like undoes one button, undoes another button, and she's unconscious, and then like reaches in her blouse, and then he gets eaten by the thing, by the blob. Sorry, when the movie ended, and I just turned over and go, the funny thing about getting older is how your perspective changed. As a kid, that was the hottest thing I've ever seen. Now I look at it and I would like talk to my kids about how inappropriate this is and how wrong it makes me feel. It's just funny how I shifted.
Yeah.
But man, this movie's so much fun. The last third isn't like completely like where I like the bigger scale and people in suits and stuff. A little less exciting for me, but it's still so awesome. And best of all, it has an extra feature with the guy he used to run Shock 2 Drop. His name was Ryan Turek. Ryan Rodden, incredible.
Ryan Rodden.
But it's a really cool interview with him and Chuck Russell at Cinefamily, and I was at that screening. But watching on Blue, I actually think it looked better on Blue than even that screening.
Being there? And,
it did. I mean, it just something about it. But it really, and this is somebody who was at the screening with us was talking, is good friends with the special effects artist who is you were talking about
Tony
Gardner,
and they were explaining how basically that was his first gig, his first solo gig, where he got the show in his last minute. Somebody pulled out, he got in there, and he was telling us kind of by sitting with us, it just happened. He didn't know I was going to show the Blob that night. He's just like, oh, I happen to be know him personally, and started telling us these anecdotes throughout. And he was texting him saying how much we're all being blown away by each move, each effect. So it was really cool. But man, it is such a quality film. I like it more than I did when I was young.
And listen to the commentary as well. It's pretty good.
I didn't listen to that with Chuck Russell.
But even the ending, even though now I'm kind of like I'm not so sure on the 80s ending, but when I was a kid, I loved it. That whole government, it's plague, we made it type thing.
Made it,
I liked it better than just if it had come from outer space when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, it's definitely more in the Darabont world. I mean, that and The Mist, I think, would be a great double feature now, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Mist. Only other one I want to quickly mention, Lace Crater. It was played at the Arena Cinema. It's a little indie. And I'm going to read to you my review. You're gonna find.
Where's my slice of pizza? Because I'm going to throw it at Elric.
No. Hey, you haven't heard my review yet. This is my Lace Crater review. This is what I wrote as soon as the movie ended. More romantic mumblecore version of The Entity, less rapey, more Swanberg. That's it. Out. So I don't think you need to know more than that.
Means,
I think if
I'm
you like,
already out.
Well, it's like if The Entity where a ghost is raping, this is a romantic version where the girl meets the ghost and has sex with the ghost and develops some sort of STD. And I love that actress, but for me, I think if you hadn't, it's very mumblecore. If you're not into that, you should steer clear of this movie.
Yep.
If that's interest,
Good. Thanks.
It's the first movie I've seen in years where I felt a little too old for the movie. I felt like personally that I couldn't identify with, and I felt like there's some 25-year-olds who are thinking this is the best thing since sliced bread. So I don't know. That's how I just couldn't.
I don't even think there's that.
I really do think there are people who are going to think it's really cool. Yeah.
It's not even described. I'm looking at it online now, and in the 3 places I'm looking, it's nowhere described as a horror film. It's described as fantasy comedy.
It's not really. It's not a fantasy movie, and it's not a comedy. It's a mumblecore movie. It's a drama.
What you bring
with
it
like
up for in this podcast?
No,
it's a ghost movie.
No.
And Chase Williamson's really awesome in it.
It's a body horror. It's a body horror.
It's a body horror.
Movie.
Yeah, she's changing.
Chase Williamson's in it.
Chase Williamson.
Chase is in it.
If he was in the whole movie, it'd be
one of the actresses.
Lindsay
from,
Burge
I think,
is awesome. I love Lindsay
Midnight
Burge.
Swim? Is that from
Midnight Swim, and she's from The Teacher. She's a great actress. She's the lead.
Yeah.
I have to say, the first time the ghost pops in is the one moment where I literally laughed out loud, and then for me, it just kind of lost me tonally. Like I said, it wasn't for me, but I did find it interesting, and I think somebody will dig it. And also, I watched Preacher, the whole series, in the last 2 days, and it took me till episode 6 to care it all, and then I really liked it. Till the end.
See, that's not a great review.
No, I mean, the first 6, I really didn't get what they're going for. I've read the comic.
Me too.
I didn't understand what they were trying to do. And then when it got to about 6 and 7, 8, I was like, oh, okay. This is kind of feels like a pre-story to where I would feel the comics were,
Okay.
So,
well, as I have it all taped, it's just I gave up at 4 or 5 because I'm I don't know.
And it wasn't grabbing me for a long time.
But everyone keeps telling me that, so it might be one of those binge movies.
I think you would probably at least think it gets better.
Right.
But I don't know if I don't know. It's so eccentric. I can't believe it's on TV. I don't
and they
know
got
how
another
it could
season.
Stay. Yeah.
Which I think is just goodwill to
It's
Seth Rogen.
Very strange. It's a strange show.
Alrighty, well, my 3 are going to be really quick. Last night I was at the New Beverly. They were showing a 35mm print of Manson, the 1973 documentary by Robert Hendrickson. Super rare. Somebody brought it up to me recently because it's not a readily accessible documentary. And also, by the way, I'm not, I'm like a moderate true crime follower. I get very upset by reading about true crime stuff. And I've never been into the whole Manson thing. It's been more of a curiosity more than anything. But the reason I wanted to see this is
glorified. It's not a glorified fascination that a lot of people have with it.
Yeah, because I have a problem with that. Yeah. But I'm always curious about, and I think in the case of this, because I was telling my roommate about it on the way out, and he's like, well, why do you want to go see it? Because this is a film that was made, it was shot for 3 years between 1969 when Manson got arrested for the murders all the way through about 1973. And it's all, the narrative is told directly from people from the Manson family. Mm-hmm. So having that kind of access to them and actually hearing directly from them, I'm fascinated by the idea of people being kind of manipulated or, because that's how I feel about it, is that they were kind of brainwashed into being into this quote unquote cult. It's a really weird, interesting movie, worth seeing once, just to kind of get a perspective of how crazy these people are. I chalk it up to a lot of LSD. And a lot of poor decisions from lost children. But, it was interesting to see it. The director popped up. Quentin was in the audience and asked him a question. So that's always a treat when you turn around and it's Tarantino's trying to ask him about...
Did he ask what did you shoot on?
No. Actually, he brought up a really good point that I had never thought of, which was because in the movie, they make it very clear that certain aspects of what the Manson family carried out, some of the crimes, were direct orders from Charles Manson about it. But the one that's not clear is the Tate murders. That was all because something, at least from what I got from the doc, was because the girl that was driving the car that night just happened to know where they lived. And it was actually more random than you'd think.
Well, the house was previously owned by a Beach Boy producer, and that was the person that Manson stayed there and had been rejected by.
Right.
So there was a revenge element, but that was the wrong person.
Yeah, but they were even saying, was there really that? That's what Tarantino was asking. Was there really a revenge element? Because they did record one of his songs.
Yeah.
sort of thing. So I don't know. They were just bringing some interesting points to light about it. But
I was going to say, have you ever seen Jim Van Bepper's The Manson Family?
No, but I actually broke because I've seen Helter Skelter, which is the Steve Railsback one. I have the Blu-ray of Manson Family,
check
which
it out.
Severin put out.
Yeah, I saw it.
I'm going to watch it next week because of this.
10, 12 years ago, and I didn't know what to expect. And that's like one of my kind of favorite Manson movies. Like there's a grittiness to it, and there's just a lack of polish to the performances.
A little bit of a surrealism to it.
Yeah.
Also, Jeremy Davies plays a good Manson.
Oh.
I can't remember which one that was
I know
called
which one you're talking about.
ago.
Yeah, from a couple years
I think
back.
Railsback channels him.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of insane how close Railsback I think gets. But yeah, it's a weird story. Also, I didn't really care for the Duchovny show where I couldn't stand that show.
Aquarius.
Yeah.
And what a bummer we'll never get that Rob Zombie.
The Rob Zombie Brady Sinellis one.
That
would have been
great.
fascinating.
That would have been amazing.
So that's interesting. I think the filmmaker said even though it's hard to get, he sells DVDs of it on eBay and Amazon or whatever. So there's that. Arrow put out a Blu-ray of Crimes of Passion, the Ken Russell movie with Kathleen Turner and Anthony Perkins. I'd only see, I'm kind of mixed on Ken Russell. Like I understand that he's a tour filmmaker, but I've been way too young to see most of his movies, so I never really knew if I liked them. I do remember that I hated the ending of Crimes of Passion when I saw it as a kid, because it just, they used Perkins in it, and then they ate kind of Psycho in it. And I was like, man, why do they always make Perkins do a Psycho thing at the end of it? But rewatching it now on this new digitally restored thing, it's a weird fucking movie that I don't know if I like it, but it's like this really weird look at the dissolution of a relationship, a marriage, and kind of like this weird seedy underbelly, because she, Kathleen Turner is like this fashion designer by day, and then by night she adopts this prostitute persona as China Blue, and then like this guy gets hired to like take photos of her and whatever. Like it also really stretches in terms of how much you can get away with. Like I remember the back when Anchor Bay put it out, the back was referencing how there's, Kathleen Turner, that's yogurt on her face. I'll put it to you that way. There's stuff like that in there where they really go for it. And what would be terrifying is if they did a sequel now with Kathleen Turner now, because
that is terrifying.
Because back then she was very attractive and she's very naked and does a lot of it's a sleazy fucking movie. I'll put it to you that way. I don't know if it's worth the Arrow price that they're charging for it, but you know what? I'd be curious what you would think, Elric. So
I think that your hashtag should be "It's not yogurt."
It's not
yogurt.
I think that should be on the box.
I read on Chris
Very
Alexander's
film,
feed that the menu for the Crimes of Passion Arrow disc was insane. So I have
Chris
to find
Alexander
out what
loves
is
this movie.
Yeah, he does.
The menu.
It looks like it was made for him.
What is the menu?
It's fucking. I mean, it's because there's a scene where the two characters just go at it for a long time, but it's like artistically behind a curtain. So it's like you see them in their shadows in every position. So that's the menu. Like the menu comes up and it's just two people in every position you could think of on, behind a curtain or whatever.
This movie is so Ken Russell.
Yeah,
I'll
it
borrow
really
to
is.
watch it. I
honestly,
only remember the poster being a kid, and I remember the lighting being very argentic.
It's interesting. It's interesting in that regard, but I don't know if I really like it.
Yeah.
And then Perkins is like, normally I like Perkins in non-psycho roles, but he's a preacher that's like obsessed with China Blue, and he's like keeps sniffing stuff, which I don't know if that's acting or not. So I'm pretty sure he may have had a little supplemental help in his performance.
Wow.
I like that you looked at Turek during the part, like he knew.
And I like that. And I like that I looked at you.
I just
like a dealer, everyone looks at the other one.
Becca just looked at her microphone.
I just looked at my watch.
And last but not least, I actually texted John Humphreys about this immediately after, because I know he liked the movie a lot. I watched Hardcore Henry, which I remember the trailers for it. It's like a gimmick kind of movie, because obviously I know that. But I watched it, and I fucking loved this movie because it wouldn't work again, but there is some fucking vibrant lunacy to this thing that magically keeps you going for 90 minutes, because you're like, I don't know how they're going to keep my attention or whatever, because it's like first-person perspective. It looks like a video game pretty much. But the reason I loved it is because literally every like 3 minutes, it kind of shifts where it's going, and it has that, how the fuck did they do that, like, thing to it, like from a technical standpoint. So like I was wowed by it, like by the filmmaking technique of it, because they're doing things that, like, obviously you're the first person, but you're like, how the fuck did they shoot that and pull it off, and why don't I see the camera? And and it just literally, it gets just crazier and crazier as it goes along. I don't know if it's the type of movie I would celebrate and watch over and over again. Nobody else can pull that gimmick off again. Like, you can't do more. Like, I'm glad that we're not in that age where, like, oh, let's rip off that movie because it did well and we could do 800 POV movies. But as a one shot of what it is, I think it's fucking fascinating filmmaking.
Was it painful to watch? Because I have problems like playing the first person shooter, so I've been kind of hesitant of seeing that film because I'm scared it's going to give me a headache.
I don't think so, only because, again, like, literally so much crazy shit happens that, like, to me, you can't help when something ridiculously gory happens in front of you. You're like, ooh, holy shit, how'd they do that? And then, like, he wipes the camera lens and the blood's off, and then he's just running off to the next thing. I think there's just like this weird vibrancy to it that
it reminded me of the Crank, the energy of the Crank
yeah,
movies.
Exactly.
I haven't seen the movie.
Exactly.
But I do find the Crank movies to be my guilty,
They're
actually, I'm going to
wonderful.
break out guilty pleasure. We never admit to guilty pleasures. Crank 2 was a guilty pleasure because I should be ashamed of that, but I'm not.
I remember that, the Godzilla fight. It's amazing.
I was on
but,
set.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I don't know if, I really hated Doom, and so I hated watching Doom, so I don't know if I'll feel the same way where it's...
I don't think
I
it's...
think it's night and day.
Yeah, it's not.
Doom is something else.
Yeah,
no matter what, because I know you obviously were critiquing the trailers when they came out and all. Just filmmaking technique. That's what's impressive to me. The way that, there's stuff where he like climbs up to the top of a building and he's looking down, and I was having like fucking anxiety attacks because I'm scared of heights. And I'm like, did a guy really climb?
Well, do you remember when GoPros first kind of came in? They made that short film where it was like two people held you hostage, and he takes off the hood, and it runs all first person.
Oh,
that was
yeah.
cool.
That's that guy, isn't it?
Is this the same people?
I think it's the same guy.
I think that, I forget his name now, but he
Elia
done a video
or something like that.
Oh, that makes sense.
Wow.
Then. Okay,
he had done a music video just like this.
Okay.
That was equally as impressive. But I think it's a great one shot deal kind of movie.
You might
a
check
lot
it
of
out
fun.
just for fun, just to
Right. Justin.
Well, this is the thing I've always, and my problem usually with movies like that, and it was my problem at times with Maniac, even though I like a lot of Maniac, was the remake was that I do believe most of the power of movies often is the reaction shot, like when you then see, not the thing you're looking at, but the reaction of the human face reacting. So when you take that out of a movie, which is what you're doing with a movie like that, and you're making the audience have to, be that reaction.
You know what? I know this is the cliche for horror movies, but it's totally apt here. It's literally like being in a roller coaster where it's going so fast that you cannot be prepared for what you're about to see. So it doesn't the reaction shot doesn't matter.
Right.
It's the fact that you're going full speed ahead and
time.
you can't stop. Like, you have to go power through. This is like one of those movies. Like, sometimes I'll watch a movie and I will, pop into the to the kitchen and grab a snack or look down at my phone or whatever. This was one that I literally could not take my eyes off of because I didn't want to miss any of it. So,
well, speaking of intense movies,
intense
movies where you don't get any room to breathe,
with crazy gore.
Who's going to be our guest, Turek?
You already know because you looked at the picture of this episode.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to get Fede Alvarez on, and we were able to capture him before he dove headlong into the press junket or the press circuit for Don't Breathe, which comes out later this month. So.
And it is spoiler free unless you haven't seen the new Evil Dead.
And I believe this is, I think he said this was his first podcast ever. So,
first.
Yeah.
Yep,
Here we go, making history.
Yep. It's a great chat. Enjoy.
Okay, and welcome back to the interview portion of this episode of Shockwaves. We were very, very excited by our special guest here because pretty sure, I think all of us unanimously went to see the Evil Dead remake.
I think we all saw it together.
We
right,
did.
for that.
In North Hollywood, I think.
No, it was...
Oh, that was opening night.
That was opening night.
So just so you know, we saw it on a press junket, on a whatever, Screamfest or whatever, and then we paid to see it opening night.
Right.
So there you go.
Because, interesting story,
you were pregnant.
I was due with my first child on the day that they did the press screening for Evil Dead, and as I walked in, the publicist looked at me and goes, "I really hope you go into labor
we were
during the
hoping
movie."
for it.
And I was kind of bummed.
Let's just say who the director is.
Oh yeah.
Welcome, Fede Alvarez, to the show.
Hey,
finally, thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me. I never done one of those.
Oh, okay.
This is his first. This is his first podcast.
We'll be gentle.
Ever.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Please be.
So obviously you have a new movie coming out August 26th, Don't Breathe. We're all really excited about it. We're going to talk about it in a little bit. But, for us, we come from the VHS generation. So for us, we discovered a lot of our love of movies and horror growing up and going to the video store. I don't really know much about your background. Where did you grow up originally?
I was born in Uruguay in Latin America, and actually moved to Belgium when I was like very young. When I was 3 years old. My father was studying over there, lived there for like 5 years, and then went back to Uruguay, and that's where I lived until pretty much the moment that that night you were talking about when you went to see Evil Dead. I was kind of about that week. I was literally moving to Los Angeles.
I remember a vague story. I interviewed you on the junket for Evil Dead, and you would tell people about how you saw the original Evil Dead movie with, I think, one of your friends. How did you find movies as a kid? I mean, because coming from a different
just like you did, guys. I mean, it's really, I'm amazed sometimes how the perspective here, and in a great way. It's just curious how usually sometimes people in the States are not aware of how common it was for the rest of the world of doing the same thing you guys were doing back in the 80s, just going to the video store and renting those movies, which talk greatly about the power of Hollywood and how far it goes. Like sometimes you think, well, it's just this thing that Americans, we make movies here in the States and it's just for that audience. And then sometimes people are abroad, because I get questions about movies that people think that they maybe never reach Uruguay, like it's like they jump on a train and
were there censorship?
Well, there is. Every country has a different one, I guess. But look, it was the same movies. It was the same video store. I will go there, choose movies, mostly based on what was in the back of in the cover. I was remember the other day, a friend of mine that we've just been doing this for such a long time, just looking for strange movies. And I was trying to remember the one with the elevator. And of course, I'm not talking about Devil. I'm talking about the elevator.
The lift?
It was like in Spanish, probably was called the elevator, and probably was the lift. But it had like a hand coming out of an elevator, and the door was closed. But inside, it had a guy sleeping with just screwing some woman against the wall in the elevator. It had probably nothing to do with the plot. But usually you were looking for the forbidden, right? Yeah. Like you were looking for that thing that was going to be strange, that your parents would definitely not approve that you were watching that film. And usually I'm sure the distributors were doing those things, like just giving you something in the back that was just a brief description of what the movie was, but usually a boob or like something very bizarre or the best makeup effect in the movie, some face exploding or whatever it was that. And I was always fascinated by that, and still are. Like how do you manage to sell what's cool about this film in just one image and 5 lines, and what are those things and images that really tap into people's minds and drag you to watch that, or like in that case it was just go ahead and put it on the table and say this one.
Well, so beyond the lift, what were kind of those iconic images or iconic movies for you growing up in terms of like the forbidden fruit movies that you discovered on your own without somebody else, kind of pushing you onto them?
Yeah, and look, the things the ones that I remember the most, which I don't know if they were iconic for me or not, but usually you remember your first experience, right? The first one when you really discovered there was a world out there. It basically was when you discovered that the guy in the video store wasn't giving you any shit because you were underage. Right? Like, when you discover that place, you realize, here's the place where our dreams are gonna be, gonna come true. And so I do remember like watching The Hand. That was kind of my first horror experience. That's Oliver Stone's second movie, I think. Yeah. I want to say
Michael Caine.
Michael Caine. Michael Caine wasn't a great point of his career right there, but it's about this guy that loses his hand, and the hand comes back to haunt him and just basically kill everybody he hates. It's brilliant, brilliant story. Actually,
cautionary tale for holding your hand up because he loses it hanging out the.
He has rage issues, I think, but he's a cartoonist, I believe. Yeah. I don't know, but then Evil Dead for sure. It was one of those that again had something very compelling in the back because it was you didn't see a trailer for that. It's not that you were exposed to any trailers. Well, you've seen that in the theaters. It was just suddenly they were there. There was so much stuff to see, right? That you weren't even thinking on opening weekend of what's new because it wasn't about then it became what's new, right? Like when the last time at video stores, it was about the new releases shelves.
That's when they'd have like 50 copies of like Canine Cop, like the wall of Canine
Cop. Back in those days,
yeah.
You remember this feeling like, I want this one. Oh, it's not available.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want me to just book it for you, or whatever you call it here? Like, if you want to save it, you were like, no, forget about it.
No, I remember like trying to rent
I want something right now.
We wanted Pretty Woman, and we would go repeatedly day after day trying to hope that it was, might be in, and it never was. But
Did they offer you that thing of, but just like
to reserve it?
We would get at my video store, we would get vouchers. So like if you went to rent Pretty Woman and you asked and it wasn't in, they would give you a voucher on a free rental later.
Yeah. Well, Blockbuster changed all of that.
Yeah.
They changed that kind of.
They had multiple copies.
Multiple copies. That instant gratification of just like waiting by the check-in bin. I would remember standing by the check-in bin waiting for somebody to just drop a VHS.
I remember doing that.
I'd be like, is that Maximum Overdrive over there?
That was the whole thing.
Where is that?
You were about to give back your movie, and there was a bunch of things that they had gave back, but Blockbuster had to put back on the shelf. So you were like trying to...
the return
What do you have in there?
As you're checking out, seeing that stack there, and you're like,
The person with the power at the video store was that clerk going, yeah, I'll just get to this later. I'll check this in later. You have to watch something else.
I miss those times. It was such a rewarding experience when you really found a movie that was, for some reason, something that will change your life, and suddenly you watch it and it feels it's just you that knows about it. And that, of course, doesn't exist. I mean, I think it exists in other ways.
Yeah.
You may go online and try to find a very obscure movie, but since the moment that you see it on Netflix, it has a rating, and it's already like kind of spoiling it for you, right? Mm-hmm. Because it has 1 star, it's going to be bad. It has 5, this one seems to be good. The whole mystery of not knowing if it was good or bad was great. And that was kind of the way, when I was in South by Southwest, I introduced my new movie. But I was so excited. People knew nothing about it, like not even the title, right? Those times are...
I think that the quest for kind of the undiscovered is still there, because when we do like our movies from the 90s that you've never heard of or anything like that, there's some of the top articles on the site. So it's like people still want that kind of mystique of I've never heard of this before, that undiscovered gem. I just don't think you find it at Redbox.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. You bring up a good point with your title, and then also kind of relating it to what they did with the Blair Witch. It kind of shows that there is still room for surprise in this day and age of information. That you guys were able to not, until the South by Southwest announcement. It was just untitled Fede Alvarez movie. And then with the Blair Witch Project being the woods for so long. I think there's still. I think that's kind of like baby steps back to bringing a little bit of excitement.
That's a new idea of American Horror Story, having 6 teasers that are out there, but only one of them is the correct teaser.
Oh,
so they're giving you false, and I love that because I need mystery. I need to be. I mean, just to prove Fede's legit. When he walked in here, I'm wearing a Possession shirt. He pointed to it and said, "I love that movie." So he's legit. Everyone,
that's a Sam Raimi one. Right?
Show over now. But I mean, I think that sense of discovery for us as film fans on VHS was a huge part of what puts you down the rabbit hole. And I think we have reached a bit of a saturation with that. And it's like, I want more mystery back. So I'm up for anything that people are going to do to keep it a little more mysterious, so it's not spoiled for me.
I've been like in this, like, right now in the whole craziness of the promotion of the movie, like you get on big tables with the studio and they start showing you trailers, stuff they're going to put out there. And something that Hollywood and those meetings usually you hear a lot is like, I suddenly start saying, like, we shouldn't show this and that because there's, people really pause the trailer these days and go through every shot and trying to figure out what it is. And usually thing they say, which is heartbreaking, is like, oh, but we have that guy's money already. Like, meaning that guy's is going to go anyway, so we don't worry. And I've been really fighting on Evil Dead, in particular in this one, we have a lot more saying on that, like, that I really care about that guy, like, because that's the guy I make the movies for. So it's not about, if I can get the masses to the theater, great. But that guy that's really fascinated by it, that wants to have a great experience, that hopefully the trailers won't spoil it. That guy is the one that I'm paying attention to when I'm in the theater watching the film, right? So it's very important that we take care of that guy. In Hollywood sometimes lately, it's just like, it doesn't matter. Like, let's try to get the one that would never care about this film, right? Because marketing, that's the point of it. But I still am very romantic about these things. I'm really trying to, as much as I can, as much as you can control it, because of course you want to get people in the theater. So you cannot just show an image of a guy and nothing else and just hopefully the audience will show up, right?
In your VHS watching days, was there a film or a moment where you realized, I'd like to try to make some home movies myself?
Yeah.
Because I always feel like the more homemade a movie looked, the more you felt like you could maybe do that yourself. Like Evil Dead's the perfect movie for that. Like, oh, you can tell somebody made it. It's not just some slick, glossy Hollywood movie. Yeah. It looks like some guys made it. And did you have one of those?
Accessible, yeah.
It wasn't, curiously enough, it wasn't a movie. And I actually remember this very recently. It's great that you asked me this. And maybe someone can help us to find that VHS. It's not a movie, which is the tricky part. But this is back in, I want to say, 88, about the time, 89. The thing that really made me think about maybe I'll be a filmmaker, or not even that, like just the fact that it made me want to shoot things and tell a story with the camera, was a VHS that I had at home. I don't even know how it found its way to my house, right? But it was there. I think my father bought it on a trip or something like that. It was in, you know, those cheap gifts that your dad brings from a trip. You know, I brought it. It's a shampoo from the hotel. Like see the cheap stuff they give away. Well, and he got that. This was a VHS that had the making of Death Wish 3. And House 2. You know House? Remember the House?
Yeah, of
House
course.
the second story.
Ding Dong, You're Dead.
Yeah.
So, and I try and remember the third movie, but again, it was 3 movies. And basically, because back in those days, you didn't have like DVDs extras to watch that. Right. I mean, how come you would see those things? I mean, maybe it was newsreels that people would show on the news when they were talking about a new movie, but usually there wasn't access to that. And for some reason, I had a VHS at home, and I'll watch it over and over again. I don't think I haven't seen those movies till today. Death Wish, no. I don't think I got to 3. I got 1 and 2.
3's awesome.
Yeah. 3's the one I go to.
Just skip right to that one.
Is that the Takedown?
No, it's the one.
It's the one that had the highest.
Now it's winter.
I think it had the highest kill
body
count
back
then.
By far.
The whole town was exploding.
At the time, like it broke some records of body count.
Yeah,
so it's just insane. But anyways, that in House 2, and I really got the chance to see how they were doing makeup and horror stuff. And House 2 was kind of goofy, but had some very fancy animatronics and stuff like that. And it's just as a kid, I was probably 10 at that point. I was just fascinated by that. It was something that I never saw before, and that really was the thing that wanted me to make these things, because I was one of those that I was just watching every day. I was just watch that thing and as if it was a movie when it was just making of. It was B-roll of.
Yeah. Well, they would do. I remember Full Moon would do kind of like these promo things at the end of their feature film.
Oh yeah.
They would have kind of like a making
the video
of
zone.
At the end of the video zone. Exactly.
At the end of
I know
Moon,
some of the other companies. Some of the other companies, not like Vestron or anything like that, but maybe the company that put out House 2, they probably had some sort of like little.
Similar.
Did you like this feature tonight? Here, watch this.
I have a making of Edge of Sanity VHS that I found. No idea why someone was like, this movie needs a making of, but it's a VHS tape, and I own that.
I vaguely remember
Did you give it to Rob? Has Rob seen that yet?
I could do without it. It's okay. I remember HBO used to do like a first look, because obviously they'd have a 2-hour slot or whatever on cable, and they'd slip in a little 5-minute making of.
I recorded all of those. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah, I would tape them because you're like, how often you get to see that?
Exactly.
Stuff?
I remember sitting there and like my dad going, "Okay, it's time to go to bed." I'd be like, "No, 5 minutes. I just need to record this little making of. I'm gonna edit right at the end of the thing." And I would go through. It was funny because when I was moving, I was going through a bunch of VHSs, and I saw one that said "The Making of Braveheart." And I was like, let me just pop this in. What's on here? And it was Ease, The Making of Braveheart. And then halfway through it, I recorded over it for some Tarantino special on Siskel and Ebert. So it was just a sliver of my dateless life growing up in Connecticut. Just getting all this stuff. But I record all of it. But I wish,
it was a way you learn. I mean, I think we're part of a generation that we learn a lot through just watching those things. And how do you really shoot a movie and all that, because information is like, it's not like, it wasn't like today when you have internet, it just like ruined the whole thing. It's just like back then you could really, you had to discover it, and discover things meant a lot. I think that's why we, just by watching those things and watching movies, like you start to crack the mystery of how they make these things, right?
Well, I don't know if it's the same with you too, but I mean, I remember when to kind of relate it to Sam Raimi, when they were doing the Army of Darkness and they were doing like the kind of making of, they would show some of the rigs, even Evil Dead 2, and the Fango. You would see Sam and the gang, and then the camera on some plank, and you're like, I could do that. Like I can. So you would like grab some like, really expensive camera that your parents probably got you and just throw it on a piece of wood and then run around with it. I mean, like that was our film school.
Yeah, there used to be, and I don't even remember which channel it was on, but it was early 90s, and they would show you how to do, it was like little clips that they would put, like interstitials, and they would show you how to do like homemade effects. I think it was called Scare Tactics.
Oh, that's cool.
But I remember one that they did.
Steve Johnson, the effects artist who at the time was married to Linnea Quigley, would do these little segments. I think it was called
That might have been this.
Where he would show you how to make fangs out of like gum.
Candy.
Gum
Yeah,
and
that's
candy.
it. That's the one I was getting.
And as a kid, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to go scare the neighbors
Then
now.
I have to show him this because there's actually, we saw that and it played before like Joe Bob Briggs show or something when I was a kid, or like USA Up All Night. And so when I was like a freshman in high school, we made a movie where everyone had Laffy Taffy fangs in, which were these fangs I had actually sculpted out of Laffy Taffy because of that Scare Tactics show. So I still have that video somewhere of us with these great purple fangs.
Did you explore other avenues of film? Did you ever want to be anything else, or was like being a writer, director the thing for you right from the get-go?
I think the thing you have to understand is I never wanted to be even a director. It was just something I was doing, and then I realized I was a grown man. I was still doing it, and one day someone offered me to pay me to keep doing it. I was like, all right, that's what I do. But it was never something that maybe it's because I'm from Uruguay and it wasn't a real career.
Yeah.
Like maybe these days, yes, you can be an independent filmmaker and starve to death if you want. But you, like in every place, I guess it's very hard to think about that as a real career. Here, if you're in Los Angeles, maybe there's so many film schools and stuff, like people can really consider that. In Uruguay, not really. Like, so it was just something that I started doing when I was 7. I was lucky enough to have a camera at home. And my father was kind of involved in, documentary stuff and stuff like that. He was a film lover. And so I had this VHS, with the cable and the backpack, not even a camcorder, just a camera and the recorder apart. And I would just do stop motion first with Playmobiles and Star Wars figures. And so I was just, from that point on, I was just doing it all the time. And it got to a point where I was like 15, I was doing the whole piece of wood or like just with roller skates, doing like some sort of dolly and just creating stuff like that with a very cheap camera. And we were doing a superhero saga back then, and where I was acting. It was the last time I think I acted. Thank God. But I've been always fascinated by the craft of filmmaker above all things, I guess, and that was the thing that got me into doing it all the time. Yeah. So I don't think there's one single aspect of the craft filmmaker that I don't kind of, that at least I'm mediocre at, but I can kind of do. Yeah. I'm a musician myself. I play a lot of instruments. I have a viola solo on this movie, on the credits. If you can see, like there's all sort of things I do. I do a lot of special effects. I actually did VFX on this movie, like budgets. When you don't have the money to pay for it, you have to do it yourself. And that there's, every aspect of it. I'm just fascinated by all that. I've always been. And so it happened to, every time I was doing something, I was happened to be the director of it.
Yeah.
And one day I realized, I looked back and I thought, oh, man, I'm doing this for 15 years now. And maybe that's what I should do for a living. But it wasn't really, something that it wasn't a master plan or a decision that I made, or like, what? It's not that I look at the horizon one day. I said, like, I got to be a filmmaker.
Yeah.
That never
Did you have
happened.
any models in Uruguay, like filmmakers who made, like, or was it mostly American influences that were?
It was mostly American influences, I guess. But there was a few. Yes, there was a few guys in Uruguay that were doing like B movies and stuff like that with no money. There's one that is a classic in Uruguay called Plenilunio, which means like full moon something, about this werewolf. But you got to imagine the most low budget version of a werewolf movie with the shittiest costume you can imagine.
Sold.
But it was amazing. It was mind blowing for me, because it was like, oh man, like you can actually do these things here. Like it's not a Hollywood thing. You can actually do it. And sometimes when you see things that are bad are the best inspiration, because you go like, I can do better, right? And if that thing that was not great has some exposure, maybe I can do better, right? That's the best motivation sometimes. Not seeing masterpieces sometimes just like, beat you to the ground. It makes you want to feel just go home and die and don't do it and never do anything, right? So sometimes it's good that there's no masters around, right?
I grew up in New Zealand, and I remember very well when I saw Bad Taste, and it was like, and it was so interesting because we weren't making horror films at that time. There'd been one, but the film commission, they'd make a couple films a year, and they realized that if they made a horror film, it would at least sell and balance the budget of all the art stuff they would make. And I remember seeing that and just going, like, the first half of it going, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And then the second half where he got funding, so he didn't have funding the first half, he made it on his own. Then they saw that and go, here's some money. Suddenly they're aliens, and I remember going, and as the years went on, it became one of my favorite, kind of like what I imagine Evil Dead is to somebody from Michigan the first time. It's like totally inspiring to think of how much imagination went into creating this thing that is kind of shitty, but also kind of amazing.
Because our parents are always going to tell us, like, forget about it, right? That's what any responsible parent should tell their sons when they want to be filmmakers, like, just forget about it, right? So it's not a real thing. Like, that's get a real job. Right. So they tell you that, and as a kid, you believe it. They tell you that you're gonna, you're not gonna go like, what, bullshit, I'm gonna do it anyways. Like, no kid says that. Maybe as a teenager, eventually, but not even that. You might say, but you believe he's right? Yeah. But it is like, when you find people like that on your community that managed to do it, they go like, I just can't do it. Like, there's no, whatever was the point of your parents is like completely destroyed by that person because they come from the same neighborhood.
They never did it. What do they know? Our parents don't.
I want to ask a little bit about, I remember when your short Panic Attack like debuted online, and it was one of those, in my memory, one of those first shorts that immediately became kind of like a viral thing, like, you have to see this thing. So I was wondering if you could contextualize a little bit. What was kind of the goal of Panic Attack? What were you making it for? Were you making it to get attention and make the next step in terms of filmmaking?
No, man. You've been listening to all I've been saying? Of course not.
I don't know.
It was just me. Before Panic Attack, they're actually on YouTube. I have some Star Wars fan shorts that I did. It was just stuff that I was doing. I mean, at that point, I was already a professional. I was doing commercials since I was like 22, something like that. As soon as I finished college, I got hired by a production company to do commercials, and I wasn't very successful at it. I would do commercials every 6 months. It was something like that. But they had me in house, and they were kind of paying me a salary, so it was great. And I was able to experiment and do things. And Panic Attack was just that. It was, again, a little bit of that thing of the small village thing, feeling that I had, and I wanted to do something that showcased my city, but with something that was big and just part of a Hollywood movie, right? Which was giant robots and an alien invasion. So I was like, I want to see that, but I don't want to see it in New York or in Los Angeles. I want to see it in my town, in my corner, in the place where I grew up, because nobody's doing it, so I might as well do it myself. And again, I've been obsessed with every part of the craft of filmmaking. At that point, I was already a VFX artist. I did every special effect on that short with a friend of mine that helped me with some of the modeling and stuff like that. But basically, it was just me doing the whole thing. And just to give you a perspective, I finished it, and it was like, now I'm going to exploit this thing to the ground. Now I got to go to every festival. My attitude was like, thank God I'm done. I showed it to one of my best friends at home. He said like, meh. I was like, yeah, whatever. And I just put it on YouTube, and I went to bed. And I was like, oh, thank God I'm done. And YouTube just released a HD format that didn't exist. The 2 weeks before that, there was no HD format in YouTube. Wow. It was just like 360, right?
Yeah.
Talking technical, but it was very low quality. But suddenly it did like, oh, now you can do HD. So I was like, oh, so I can put it there, and just for the reason and purpose of sending to my friends and whoever was going to see it in Uruguay, or just like forward a link and not a MOV and not a actual QuickTime. And I put it there, and I went to bed, and I woke up, and I had like 150 emails from Hollywood. And I was like, who are these people? I had no idea what an agency was, to give you an example. Wow. So I couldn't be looking for an agent when I don't know what an agent is. Still don't know. But all I knew to take my 10%. But it was basically they're great. Sorry. But basically they were pitching every agency, every major agency here, every studio, every producer, everybody. It was like insane. I was just scrolling through emails, just having a laugh with my friends. It was really.
I wonder how that starts on you. Like you posted, I wonder who the first person who has to share that for it to catch fire.
It's usually an assistant or a development exec who.
No, you know who he was. I know who that.
Oh,
person
you've traced
was.
it back to patient zero.
Yeah, it was very easy because YouTube shows you the links of all your hits where you come from. It was Kanye West.
Are you serious?
Jared, you sure?
It was him.
Wow.
He used to have. I mean, he knows he's got like a kind of a joke these days for everybody. I guess I don't know. I cannot even sing one of his songs. I'm completely out of that world. I have no idea who he is. I know who he is, his name, but it's basically he used to have a very influential blog in the animation world. He was doing really good curations of animation stuff and like music videos. Like this is like
my
obviously
mind's kind of blown. Guys,
7 years ago. It was 7 years ago now, and he was doing that, and he picked it up from this other smaller website. And he really was the one that blew it up here in Los Angeles. Hey, if one day I met him, I had to go like, "Hey, dude, thank you for that."
His glowing review of Pacific Rim makes total sense now.
What did he say in Pacific
He
Rim?
tweeted it was like the best movie he's ever seen in his life or something like that.
So he likes giant robots.
He likes giant robots.
Yeah, giant robots.
I think the winner is that you use that piece of music from 28 Days Later. It's In a Heartbeat.
In the House in a Heartbeat by Tom Murphy. Yeah.
That you could cut that to anything. And it'll work.
You're completely true. The shirt was kind of okay. I put that music on and it was amazing. And then I had to remove it because I was like, I don't have the rights for this. But then it was like, I think I'm just going to keep it. Like nobody's going to sue me because nobody's going to see it. And then they saw it. And actually, I remember getting an email when I think WME was trying to sign me. They're my agency these days, but at that point I signed with CA. They were trying to sign me, and they sent me an email from. Usually what they do is send you emails from other directors they represent just to get you, just a bunch of name dropping, and they sent me an email from Danny Boy saying they have seen it and he loved it. And he made the remark, of course, that the music was his favorite part. He was saying I hit like that.
That's amazing. It's just like the ripples of excitement, I'm sure. Just like Kanye, Danny Boyle. I mean, for you,
I had no idea who Kanye was at that point.
No,
I had
absolutely.
No idea. It's just dude.
Right.
But for you, then eventually, like 3 years later, I looked back. I was like, wait a second, and I just like went and checked it back, and it was like who he was. But at that point, I had no idea.
Like what did you do getting up and getting all this attention over the next couple of days in Uruguay?
But that's just the beginning, because the best part of the story is that that's a Sunday. The agency actually flew, like one of the agencies, I'm not going to name it, but they fly me to LA, business class. Never
Had
flew
you been
business
to LA
class in my
before?
life. Yes, I've been. I had another story that is my first LA story that is insane also, but this is the second insane LA story actually. And I come here, I have like 2 weeks set up, lineup of meetings with everybody, right? And I go to have coffee with Roy Lee, which is a producer that you guys might know. Yep. It's a great Hollywood producer. And we have coffee in the morning, blah, blah, blah. You know, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I just land here. I'm not understanding what's going on. And when we're saying goodbye, I ask him just in a cheeky way, like, what are you going to do? Where are you going? And he said, I'm just going to catch a screening. And I'm like, is that a free movie? And he says, like, yes. And again, can I go? And he said, like, well, let me check. He sends a text. And he's like, oh, yes, you can come. It was a private thing, so you couldn't just bring anybody. Right. But I was like so excited. I was going to see a free movie, and I was in Hollywood. And he takes me to see a screening of Kick-Ass, of a very early version of Kick-Ass, because they were trying to pitch the director to direct Oldboy, the remake. And he was pitching it to Nathan Kahane, which happens to be the producer on Evil Dead and also Don't Breathe. And we just, by accident almost, because I tag along into that thing, I get to know him on the screening. I watch the movie. I give him my notes on the cot, which was really brilliant at that point, but still I had some things that weren't working for me. So I give him some notes. We chat, blah, blah, blah. I go to the bathroom. While I'm going to the bathroom, Nathan Kahane started negotiating with this guy like some $1 million deal for me to make a movie. At that point, I got to tell you, I'm on the bathroom checking the toilet paper, which is so soft in Beverly Hills. I'm like, oh my God, they have this in a public bathroom. This is better than towels I have at home.
Rubbing it on
and when
face.
I'm rubbing it on my face,
it's Crocodile Dundee
like
3.
It's insane. Like Nathan, these guys are talking about like, oh, this guy's a millionaire. Like he won't do it for nothing. Like he's not going to take a small movie. I would have said yes to anything to throw my way. But and then I come back to the conversation. They're like, everybody's acting cool. I go back to the hotel and I get a call like, look, they offering you a blind deal to make a $30 million movie, whatever you want it to be, and just you'll figure it out. But you have a movie deal. And I was like,
30 million,
what?
you'll figure it out.
I should have done this ages ago. This is like the easiest thing in the world. And obviously, I know now that it's not, right? But back then, you got to believe me. I mean, my perspective was like, it just landed here. I went to see a movie, and the first guy that I meet wants to offer me to make a movie, right? It was just insane. And I canceled all those meetings because I had no need to have them. I was just excited. I wanted to go back home. That night, I think I was in Chateau Marmont in Hollywood, and I was having drinks with Dr. Shepard from Lost, which was my favorite show at that point. We're just having drinks, and I realized at that moment, like, wait a second, nobody back home knows about this. I have to go and call someone. I went to the bathroom and called Rodo, my co-writer in this and Evil Dead in this movie, and I was like, dude, we got to make a movie in Hollywood. And he was like, what?
We can get Matthew Fox.
Yeah, we can get Matthew Fox. Actually, I have a drink with him, and he was like, what? I was like, I call you tomorrow and tell you all about it. And that deal eventually, that relationship turned into Evil Dead, and that's basically how I ended up making movies here, which I know is pretty bizarre, but that's how it happened to me, and like it was a lot of fun.
Did they then send the film to Raimi?
He have seen it already.
Oh, he'd already seen it.
Yeah. By that point, everybody's seen it in Hollywood. Yeah. That's already like a few days, like 4 or 5 days after he went viral here. So everybody's seen it. And that was Nathan commentary to me. He was like, "Oh, you're the guy that made the short, Sam Raimi's side, and he loved it." The funny part is, I was naive, but at the same time, I was very cautious, and they offered me that blind deal to have a movie like Chaperone by Sam Raimi, and my comment was like, "Yeah, but I won't sign anything until I talk with Sam Raimi," because I was like, I love his movies. I'm a huge fan, but maybe he's an asshole, and I don't want to make a movie with him. So now I look back, and I was like, what was I thinking? Obviously, it was part of the feeling that I thought it was easy. It was so easy because I just landed in the first person I met. So I was like, must be others like him. I don't know if that was the case, but at least I was brave enough to challenge that, and I'm proud of that because I've seen even today a lot of people that just go through the same offer they get. The first thing they hear, they just say yes. The goal is to just make a movie. It doesn't matter what it is, and all the things that thank God for some reason I did have that. I was like it really meant so much to me. That was, if you asked me at that point, what is the goal in your life? It's just I have to make a feature. That was all I cared. Like, I was going to try to hopefully do that in Uruguay someday, but it was the goal of my life. But it was almost like a dream that I never confessed to anybody, right? So suddenly when I was in that situation, I was like, now I got to make sure that I make the right thing, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, we spoke to Sam, and of course he's the sweetest man alive. He's great, and we were exactly on the same page about what was the kind of movie that I should do, and it was the thing that we just talk movies, and you realize when you talk movies, it's kind of a language that you understand exactly if you get along with the other person or not, and that's how the whole thing of the first movie came about. That's amazing.
Was it true that you were talking to Sam about another movie, possibly Panic Attack as a feature, and then he was like, "What do you think of Evil Dead?" Is that how it kind of came up?
It kind of happened at the same time. I mean, honestly, that first deal. First was, why don't we make a feature version of the short? And my answer was like, no, that makes no sense. The short is meant for 5 minutes. I don't see a feature version of that. I mean, again, insane. Like usually, I would advise any filmmaker out there, if they make a short and they want to make it turn into a movie, say yes. Like you just say yes to all. And but for some reason, I said like, no, I think that makes no sense. Let's just, if we want to do an Alien Invasion movie, which I did, let's just create a new one, and we do something different. And we started kind of developing that, and we had another writer came in to work on that. At that point, I was naive enough to think that I just could pitch that to a writer, and they will turn me a great script, and I will shoot it. Now I know it's not the case. And through that project, I learned that it's not that easy, right? And while I think we're starting to developing that, Sam asked me also, like a second project, like what about making a new Evil Dead? And I was like, yes, let's do it. I was such a big fan, and also like, look, it's the thing that everybody asks me always about the challenge, of course, of making a new Evil Dead and all that, and the burden or whatever is if you gotta try to frame it in a dark perspective. Like, get to understand that from my point of view at that point. Like, who's going to say no to that? Who's going to go like, exactly, you know what? No. Like, just, you don't remake classics. Like, no. And you're not going to tell no to Sam Raimi. I would have said no to this. If a studio was just coming to me saying, like, we're going to exploit this property, I would have said no, like I said many times, what other approach that I've heard on that tone. But this is the filmmaker saying, like, you know, I think that story deserved to be brought to, you know, a new a modern audience, because the reality is, like, young kids will have no clue what Evil Dead was. I tell you as a fact that 50% of the audience or more that saw my movie thinks it's an original movie. They don't know it's a remake. It doesn't say remake on the title, and during I don't even remember if the promo material said anything about that. And like, because like when I saw The Fly or when I saw The Blob or when I saw The Thing, I had no clue they were remakes. I just saw them as new movies and I enjoy the hell out of them. So it's not until you become, you know, more of a connoisseur and you go and dig back and you realize there are remakes. So I thought, like, I can do that for a younger audience and give them those movies. I'm not gonna deprive them, you know, from having, you know, like a new version of those movies. That obviously I was hoping it could be good and could survive and could do what The Fly and The Blob and those movies did for me, right? The Blob. I'm talking about The Blob. It's a masterpiece.
It is good.
The Blob is good.
It was pretty quintessential in the 80s.
I'm not talking about Steve McQueen.
I'm sorry, you're talking about the guy who did the commentary for The Blob.
Yeah,
what we discussed today. I'm
talking about the Kevin Dillon.
Well, it totally blew my mind when I saw it because I knew one existed beforehand because my mom talked about it. But it was impressive. There was half a body in it. Come on.
It was great. I'm not saying it's a masterpiece.
No,
I love it when it came out, right? But it's not that it left a legacy. But for us, probably did, right?
It's not like The Fly. The Fly holds up because of its themes and stuff. Nobody looks at The Blob. Everybody looks at The Blob and goes, "Those effects are fucking killer."
I think
but they don't go,
first 2/3 holds
thematically
up
speaking.
It's pretty.
And it's got Shawnee Smith. Heyday Shawnee
Smith.
Yeah.
Well, just to prove that your point was valid, I remember the second time I went to see your Evil Dead, because I didn't stay the first time, and everyone's like, "Oh, like Bruce Campbell's at the end after the credits." So I stayed to the end, and there was a group of really young teenage kids in front of me. And when Bruce came on and said his groovy, they're like, "Oh my God, it's the guy from Burn Notice." And I was like, they had no clue why he was there. And I was like, no clue. All right, so be it.
There's going to be a Burn Notice crossover. It's amazing.
But it also, like, the other thing that I add is that I wasn't remaking The Exorcist. I wasn't remaking, and with all due respect to Sam movie, and he knows that. It was a movie made with no money. Right. It's like very campy. It's like Z-class. It's like no budget. It's insane. I loved it when I saw it the first time, and it blew my mind because it was so scary. It was the scariest thing I ever seen when I watched that movie. So that was the thing that I was trying to bring back those feelings into a new movie that had more of a format that will appeal a bigger audience. And so I think there's other movies, like other horror classics. Like, it's the same thing we talk about The Fly and The Blob. Like, there's, I think Evil Dead is better than The Blob, but still, it's one of those that you can make it with other techniques and make it more modern without being. And again, we were never trying to overwrite that one. We just doing a new one. Yeah. So it was more of a sequel in my mind, always like a reboot sequel thing.
I think it also kind of brought out a collective amnesia that everybody seemed to have. Those who even did remember it peripherally.
Oh, thinking that the first one was funny.
Yeah, because I remember when the press started coming out, and I was at Fangoria at the time, and it was like, there's a new Evil Dead and it's not going to be funny. And I remember just seeing the comments we had boards at the time and people being like, "What the hell is not going to be funny? That's not Evil Dead." And then we had to be like, actually, yeah. But it was like everyone had forgotten that the original Evil Dead was very visceral, very just serious, scary as shit, and very kind of homespun.
And taboo breaking, a lot of taboo breaking and stuff that's very out there, like tree rape. Obviously. How early was it, and did it come from you or Sam, the idea of not including Ash as a character? Because for me, that was the instant thing that made it let me just experience it as its own film. And I think without that, if some guy had walked in going, "My name's Ash," suddenly you would have had this weird feeling towards the film. Yeah. But without that, it was brilliant. And weird that was that just
it was just
on?
Me saying, as a fan, I was like, don't make me do that. Like, I don't.
Yeah, smart.
Nobody wants to see that. It would have been impossible, not just for the actor that plays that, because Ash has that it thing that is kind of impossible to drag. To the sense that you tell him, you gotta go and tell the actor just go and be Bruce Campbell. It's just impossible, right? It's
and he didn't really have it on the first one. That's the funny thing. It's really the second film that becomes a thing. You know?
Yeah. So it was clear that we were gonna have new characters, a new story, and also as a filmmaker, it would have been interesting to just tell that story again. Yeah. It was really. I tell you how we did it. Honestly, it was. When I was going to pitch it to Sam, I was like, I'm not going to rewatch it. And probably at that point, I've seen it like 10 years ago, right? Probably. I've seen it a couple of times, and the last time was like 10 years before that. And it was like, and I was about to rewatch it. I was like, maybe I shouldn't watch it again. And I should just try to come up with a story where I've put in the story the things that I remember that stood with me after so many years. Because whatever stood with you must be the best parts, right? Yeah. Whatever you forgot is probably not so interesting. So I really tried to do that. And the first pitch to him, before we had the full movie, but kind of my approach of what would I do, include those strong images that stood in my mind and really made an impression when I saw it the first time, which was, of course, the girl talking through the cellar door and being all mean and that deceiving thing that the characters had, like you never know when they're possessed or not, and they playing with you, the isolation factor of the last survivor that's suddenly surrounded by death and there's demons somewhere and is possessing his friends. Like all the things were the big things and ideas that I knew that if we do a new one, all I need is to have the things that I remember. If I have to rewatch it, then I'm cheating. I'm just like recreating or just like reproducing the same idea again. So we really went with that, with our guts of what we thought was Evil Dead. And for me, it was always a terrifying movie. I mean, and I love Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, great classics. But that's something I saw when I was, again, more of a teenager, like already entering a phase of more like really getting to film and know the directors and the writers. But most of the audience don't do that. It's just this gut feeling of why a movie is scary, what are the themes, what is provoking about it. So if you get too deep, and then I eventually did something that was, I think, hopefully for everybody. It had that part for the people that didn't know anything, and there's like, and it's filled with details that are like quotes or like just Easter eggs of the original, like to a level that even a lot of people haven't discovered. Lots of them, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a hyper awareness as you get older as a film fan or a horror fan. It's like seeing Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time and going, "What the fuck? This is like someone insane is behind this camera."
Yeah,
and then getting older and learning more about the aesthetic of film and stuff like that, and going, watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre from that perspective and going, oh, I see what they did there, and Toby was moving the camera here, and this little zinger. So I totally get that, especially with Evil Dead, because I remember renting that on just like a Saturday night during summer, and I'd seen Evil Dead 2 first. So watching Evil Dead, I was like, what the hell? It was like reverse engineering. It was like, where's the laughs? Bruce looks so much like Bruce looks like a baby, and he's such a chump in this. Like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I didn't like the original Evil Dead for a really long stretch because I saw Evil Dead 2 in Army in high school, and then somebody was like, oh, let's check out the original, and we were like, what is this garbage? No, this isn't Evil Dead. And I didn't have like
watch the second and the third first. Like, if I knew, even when I was 12, I knew there was a previous one, I would never watch that.
Oh my god! Actually,
I know about accessibility.
Never.
Yeah,
Number 2 in it. I haven't seen the first one. Not interested.
Wow. I may have actually seen Army first because I saw it in the theater. I remember seeing.
Really?
I saw Army of Darkness in the theater,
theaters too.
And I can't remember whether I saw that or the second one first.
Evil Dead 2 was pitched to me as because my dad was a huge horror fan, so he was just like, "Look, he's like, you really don't need to see Evil Dead 1 because this is kind of like a reboot. Wasn't in the vernacular at the time. It was just like." You could start with this. It's fine. And so we jumped right in. Yeah. But
he's making faces at you. Right?
I know.
No excuse.
I'll slap my dad. Yeah.
Although I will say, because obviously as a kid, I saw them all, but I related more. Like I loved Evil Dead 2. It was just everything about it was my taste. Yeah. But years and years later, I saw a revival screening of the original Evil Dead, and it took on a whole different meaning seeing it on the big screen with an audience.
Absolutely.
Like then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I totally get this movie now and why it is what it is. But
I liked it more seeing it recently.
Yeah.
I'm shocked that I liked it more, the first one over the second. They played back to back with Bruce and Sam talking, and after the first, I was like, the second started, I was like, I've seen the second so many times, I was like, I don't know if I need to stay for the rest of the second. But the first was like seeing it, I know it's just exciting to see it like that again.
And I've often said to me the best test of a remake is if you could do a double bill with the original and the remake back to back, and it plays great, like you're not watching the exact same movie, but same theme, then you've got a good remake.
Yeah, that word faithfulness. It's like, I think it's really weird when people write, "Oh, it's not faithful to the original." It's like the only thing you want to be faithful to is a feeling. But if you're faithful to the story, I don't need to see it. I mean, the thing, let's say the Blob, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the films felt totally new versions of a story, of an idea, filtered through a director who had something to say with it.
So I'm curious, kind of like getting the 1,000-yard view of who you are before you do Evil Dead, and then going through the process of working with Sam, working on set of a multi-million-dollar movie, and then dealing with the fans, and then coming out the other side. How had you changed a little bit in terms of how you see film, how you just as an artist as well?
Yeah, it's a very tough question. I mean, this is, think about actors. With actors, the best actors are the ones that have, if I have to really point one ability they have, is to not be self-aware when they acting, right? Mm-hmm. They have that ability to suddenly they turn a switch and suddenly they're not here. They're in a parallel dimension that is a movie, and it usually is scary to see that. It's scary in a fascinating way. Like, it's just like you don't know how they do it, right? So I had that ability when I made Evil Dead. I was in completely, in a different world. I was reading some of the things online, but I was just fascinated. There was like 100 people talking about a movie that Fede was going to do. It's just insane because like not too long ago, I was back home with not even a plan at ever working in Hollywood. So the bright side was always better. It was like, oh my God, like what's happening, right? I was writing the script and reading on my side, like this movie's gonna suck. Like, oh, well, we'll see. It was just
fade out.
It was insane. Like, it was really, since the day was announced, and there was debate. There was people saying, and most people were, particularly in the first part, like when it was just announced and being developed, everybody was saying no. And for me, it was like, well, at least people cares, and it's insane that people care so much. So I think I'm a bit more aware today of many things that I wasn't. Like when I tell you a story how I got a short, I know that doesn't happen every day, right? And I know how hard it is to get any movie made these days. So what does that do? I don't know. I think I want to think that, and I want to say that I'm more cautious about certain things, because on Evil Dead I was just a madman. I was just like doing whatever came to my mind, and on set, I remember my opening speech on set was like, okay, everybody here made a movie except me, and I'm a director, so we kind of fucked. So it was basically, I'm going to need everybody's help, and it was a fact. It was just a fact. It was like everybody, even the PA was involved in more features than I was, because when you make your first movie, you're the only one that hasn't made one. Unless you have work as an AD, stuff like that I never did. Mm-hmm. So, but that gave me a lot of freedom to just, not know exactly what I'm supposed to do and what I'm not supposed to do, and not know, like, when I'm pitching the rain blood in the script, I had no idea, like, how complicated it was going to be, and the nightmare that it was going to be. Like, everything was drenched in blood, the cameras, everybody was just, like, working on this, like, inside this plastic bags. It was just a nightmare. So the more you go through to experience that, just show you how hard it is, the more you learn. And learning is a bad thing sometimes when it comes to these things. Like it's like they say, the more you learn, the less you know, they say. And it's true. I mean, the more you learn, you become more cautious, and that's what I'm really trying to fight. So I think on Don't Breathe, I really did like, what, if I was a crazy person in Evil Dead, I gotta be even more insane here. Once I embrace, when I decide this is a movie I'm gonna make, I don't have to care about anything. You've seen the movie, and you know what I'm talking about, right? It just gets to a point that it really gets to a point that, some audience goes like, I'm out. Like, it just is ridiculous. It just goes too far, right? At some point.
So,
and some,
now I'm in.
Yeah, but if you're a fan of horror, you go like, yeah, baby. Because you don't want down the middle. You don't want watered down. You don't want like Hollywood PG-13, whatever. You want the real thing, right? You want something that gets to a point that you don't understand how someone could have done that or shot that and said like, this is going to be great. It's going to work.
You don't want to feel safe. As a horror fan, you don't want to feel safe.
You want to feel like you fall in very fast and the gravity is just pulling. You don't know when you're going to hit the floor, right? It's just like you're falling in a dark hole, and it's like, and you're like, oh my God, when it's coming. And that's what it should happen. So because I'm a bit more self-aware now of those things, that as an artist, the worst thing that can happen to you is just try to be cautious or be worried or be scared about what may happen. And because Evil Dead, against all odds, it worked. I mean, just the fact that there was an audience that embraced it and went and just making a gory movie at that level of gore and make it a massive hit, like massive audience showing it to see it and make a movie made like $100 million worldwide. That was never done before. I mean, there's a movie that is so gory that has that level of success, right?
Because I can't believe what you guys got away with.
Yeah, it's insane. Well, it's R-rated. That should be NC-17.
Even Don't Breathe, you've got away with a little bit of stuff too.
Of NC-17 texture.
Did you have to combat the studio execs for that? I mean, because being a first-time filmmaker, I feel like sometimes they might be like, it'd be like filmmaking by committee where they're trying to pressure you into certain decisions. But did you have to get combative to have that level of gore, or were they just kind of like, do your thing, man?
No, on Evil, I mean, it was very clear on the script, right? It read NC-17. It read like something that was just impossible to put on the screens and say it was rated R. And Rob Tapper, like producer of the originals and Sam Raimi's partner on all those movies, he said like, look, this read as NC-17. And my pitch was like, look, there's none of those things that if you cut them out, the story makes no sense. Most of them are just to shock you and scare you, which is what the demons are trying to do. So it's part of the story, right? And so it's like worst case scenario, we don't show it, but let me shoot it, right? And then, of course, I said I'm going to do all practical, and that's when they lose their minds. They're like, wait a second, we're going to spend all this money doing this very fancy practical effects that are going to take over the whole day, and then you're not going to use it. And I was like, well, now we're here, we're going to dance, right? Let's just do it. And they were like, that's really credit to them and Sam Raimi, Rob Tapper, who were like, well, after a few days of shooting, you kind of realize if the director knows what he's doing or not. And they were like, after 10 days of just do the drama and some setup stuff and just shooting, they go like, well, this guy's, he's not insane. Because it takes, I mean, you guys know, I don't know if the audience knows, but really leading these machines that are making movies and leading a pack of 100 people, like you cannot be insane, right? Like if you're just never going to get anywhere. So it's always a mix of both. And I think after a few days, they saw, well, Fede knows what he's doing. Just leave him to do his thing. And I did it. And then like the whole committee part of Hollywood that you're talking about usually comes after they test the movie and test low, right? Mm-hmm. All these movies get a screen test and you get a score. And if that score is low, that's when everybody sleeve up and say, hey, how are we going to fix this? And that's when the whole committee comes and the filmmaker goes like, they crushed my vision. That wasn't my movie, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I've been lucky that my 2 movies, we tested once, score very high. We never test them again. So we never get to the point of having everybody throwing opinions on how we're going to fix it. Because if I deliver a cut that is my director's cut, that when I show it to an audience, I have a standing ovation, like we got an Evil Dead and we got an Don't Breathe at the test screening, which is the coldest audience you'll ever get. Mm-hmm. Then the studio goes like, we're not going to change this, even if they don't like it, because I know an Evil Dead that didn't like some things and a Don't Breathe that didn't like other things. But once you have your audience behind you clapping, all you do the just
for those of you at home, he's doing like a victory dance. How would you describe
your
that?
audience? Like everybody claps and you go, they're there, and and so nobody can fight it. And again, I had really great producers on my 2 movies, and the same studio. Which, if they trust me on Evil Dead, they trust me even more on this one. So I've been lucky to get away with whatever I want to do. And I really believe I always say that usually the movies. The best movies are the ones that I enjoy the most. Usually, come from directors that that are coming out of a movie that really worked in the box office, regardless if it was good or not. Because that's usually when the studio empowered them, right? Like Children of Men, like this. That movie will never get made if it wasn't because he was coming from some massive Harry Potter movie or something. Yeah. Like you get those, movies just when you come out of something that works. So either you go safe or you go crazy and do whatever you want. And that's what I did with Don't Breathe. I was like, I just going to do exactly what I want to do. I'm going to roll back a little bit and feel like this is my first movie. Like if Evil Dead was my first movie, obviously, but because it was Sam's as well and it was based on Sam's, I really needed to go to a white page and create a story from scratch. And I think to answer your question, like that was the thing that I really enjoyed in this one and that I couldn't experience on Evil Dead, like writing without people saying it's going to suck right away because nobody knew about it when I was writing it, and it wasn't until they saw it that it knew it existed. So that gives you a lot of freedom, and as a director, that's what I want. That's what I enjoy.
Well, that kind of ties into another question I had about just touching on Don't Breathe a little bit. After Evil Dead, you probably had a bunch of projects flung your way, and you probably could have been attached to a bunch of stuff, but you decided to self-generate something again. What was the decision behind that, as opposed to taking something that was already created on page by somebody else and allowing you to just go and run with the money and make a big movie?
Oh, that's the thing, I guess, is that I don't. Part of it is a decision, and part of it is just emotional. Just you read scripts, right? Scripts are sent your way. And after Evil Dead, I got all those, calls for. Sometimes it wasn't just the offering this movie, but I remember they were asking me they want to meet you for Fast and the Furious, right?
Yeah.
Of 6, I think they were doing, like James Wan ended up doing, and I would answer the email saying subject no. It's just like not because I think those movies are bad. I really enjoy the shit out of some movies. Some of those, and some of those, honestly.
One of them for me.
And some of them are great. But it was like that's not as a filmmaker, I think I just want to make movies that my audience, when they go to see it, the fact that they know who directed it and what they did before makes the whole experience better. Because as an audience, that's how I enjoy most of the best movies I've seen. It was like, I'm going to see the new movie from this guy. And it just makes the whole experience more personal. I don't know. There's something about when there's not a lot of filmmakers that people know their names and they associate them with other movies, and makes the whole watching of the movie part of the experience. And if I can wish for something in my life, that's what I want to do, right? I want to make my brand. I want to have my name and my movies that people can remember and can see, like, that's the filmography. Oh, he did that, and then he went to that Crazy Face when he did that other one, and then he went to the. And I think if you go to do Fast and the Furious, it's just like you go to a limbo of what does that mean? Like, I don't see Fincher making one of those.
It's hard for a filmmaker to put their stamp on it, because it's kind of like it's like doing TV. It's like you go in, point the camera, you work with characters that are already pre-established.
Exactly. Yeah. Like recently, it was all over the place with this article, which kind of was true, that it's saying they say no to a Marvel movie. It's not that I was in deep conversations with them. I was like, fuck them. I never got to that. It was kind of the same thing. I got the conversation. They were talking about one of those movies, and I was like, oh, no, man. And then what really made me when I decided not to do it was like, I'm not going to pursue that, because I realized I couldn't really tell the difference between what was the style of Joss Whedon or like Jon Favreau. I couldn't. Like, how come? I know and there are other movies, but I don't know based on his Marvel movies or like the Russo brothers. And they're all masters of their craft and they're awesome, but the movie takes so much of what the whole thing is, and the style in Marvel and the colors, and a lot of those big movies do that, right? They just take over, and the filmmaker kind of disappears there, which doesn't mean they don't do anything. They do a lot, and they work their asses off in those movies. But still, it's just like who's directing it doesn't make part of the experience, and for me, that's important. That's why I always been trying to, avoid those, and that's the emotional part. It's not a real decision. It's just when I go, my gut, I cannot do it. Like, even if I try to convince myself and go like, oh, that's a good job, like just go do it. Yeah. Then just emotionally, I cannot spend a second thinking that's the thing I'm gonna do. I might do it someday, once I have more movies, and also because I think in order to succeed and make good movies on that role, I think you need some body of work and some gravitas in the room when you're gonna discuss with the whole studio what you're gonna do. And I don't think I'm there yet. I think I have to make more movies to prove, I don't know, dude. Honestly, there's no master plan. It's all emotional. It's just like, that's what I want to do.
Oh, that's great.
Those things, I'm not too crazy about it. And I really want to be able to control my ideas. And that's why usually I like more the scripts that I write, not because they're better, it's just because I wrote them. And obviously all the themes and ideas that are there are exactly the things that I like, because that's why I wrote them. And when I read someone else's script, it's not exactly my point of view, or it's not exactly my sensitivity. So I end up usually saying no, or just if I'm going to put a lot of work in that script, I just decide to put a lot of that work on my other script that is at least my own. And again, so far I can afford it, which is the whole key in Hollywood.
You mentioned doing primarily practical effects on Evil Dead, which is both admirable and completely fucking insane. But was there one, like, what was the worst one? The one that you were like, oh my God, I can't believe we decided to do this practical. Like,
the cutting the arm off in the kitchen, when she goes with that bread cutter and cut her arm off, because we want to do that practical. I want to see her arm falling. I mean, I want to see her with her real arm there, and she goes for it and start cutting. There's a cut there in the editing, but it's not that you couldn't. If you were standing there, you will see exactly what happened in the movie. And that became, I mean, it's not that I would decide not to do it. If I do it again, I will do it exactly like I did it. But it was just 2 shots, one entire day of shooting just to do that. Because the reset is a sucker, right? You have to the whole kitchen is covered in blood. There's one makeup piece. I mean, it's very hard to explain in a podcast, but basically we had a person behind the counter, another girl with her arm stretched out. So this arm belonged to someone else that is right there. This is the prosthetic that is just connecting the one actress with the other actress is the forearm. And so this is what she's cut, and it has a pipe, and blood is coming out. So it was really kind of, it was a prosthetic that was rigged with blood inside. So all the actress had to do was just cut it, and that's it. And she couldn't really bring herself to do it because her real arm was behind her and fell asleep, so she couldn't feel it. So her brain was convinced that this hand that is a real hand that is moving in front of her is her arm. So and this thing is it's a real knife that will cut you because you need to cut through the prosthetic. So she was about to do it many times. I was like, I'm sorry, my brain is just like stopping me from doing it. It's just survival mode. So it took forever. And then when she did it, she kind of hesitates. The thing didn't work. I had to fix it. But then eventually, I think on the second shot, it worked. And it was fantastic. It was just to see it on the moment, it was shocking. So I was hoping that, hopefully that translates into the movie. Yeah. But we all so savvy with film, even the main audience are so used to the fact that if they see someone holding a hand and someone's going to cut it, they know there's going to be a cut right before the cut. There's going to be a cut to your eyes, and then you're going to see a close-up of the hand, and that gives them comfort that they know that's when they cut to the prosthetic. Even if they don't go through all that, their brain goes somehow through that. Like they know, okay, it's been a cut there. That's not the person anymore. So because rarely you see someone, I don't know, getting shot in the face with not a cut before or some editing slick thing there. So it's good if you can really do it in a very explicit way and raw and show something that has a real effect, it just goes a long way. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely the one that took forever, but it worked. At the end of that day was fantastic. Everybody was gone. I was just looking at the kitchen, and I walked into it just to see the mess. And I looked to my left, and the actress is still there. Everybody's gone, right? It's the end of the day, and she's like still there with her arm hanging. And she's just shaking and all traumatized by spending 12 hours sitting on the floor, not able to move. And she was like, and I'm like, are you okay? She's like, yeah, I think I'm going to go home now. And it was like, I think everybody's gone. It was just fantastic just to see that it did that in a person, and she's fine, right? Nothing happened to her. She was just in that place mentally, and that's what you want as a director, to just be able to make your actors go through something that they don't have to fake the emotions. That what happened is so shocking even for them that it translates to the movie, right?
Yeah. You mentioned before that with the testing process that the final movie that goes out is your director's cut. Like if it works for the audience, that's the version of the movie that you wanted to put out. But because we're the horror fans that we are, I'll never forget seeing a still in a Fangoria magazine from Evil Dead 2 of like half of Evil Ed's head missing. And then you go see the movie and you're like, oh my God, where's that shot? I've imagined it. I saw it in the magazine and it's not there. Obviously there's similar things with your Evil Dead because there's stuff from the trailers that didn't make it in the movie. Yep. There were rumors of a director's cut or an extended or whatever. So I just kind of wanted to get your side of the story. Is there a longer version of the movie, or is the one that came out the one you prefer?
There is, but it's not a director's cut. It's just usually what I do, like most directors do. You do a first cut. Right, and you look at it, and it's too long. Usually, the first one. So I made the decision. Like I don't know why most directors they have their first cut that they actually present to the producers are very long. That's why I heard all the time they're very long and kind of self-indulgent. And I don't do that. I really cut it to the bone to make sure that that's the sharpest piece of storytelling that I can tell. I don't want the producer to tell me like that scene doesn't work. Get out of there. And so I really try to take it to a very effective machine of storytelling if I can. And so on Evil Dead, I think we had a scene where David was going to the shed and chopping his girlfriend into pieces to fulfill the prophecy. And there was a couple of things that were actually in the trailer, but because the trailers, usually when you have that long cut, that's why you send to marketing to start working on the cuts and the trailers and all that. So while they're doing trailers, I still cut in the movie. So my cut is the one that I put out. I just, but then there was a rumor that, it wasn't a rumor. It's just like you said, they saw the trailer. It was like, wait a second, there's more stuff. What there was is an extended version, which doesn't mean it's a director's cut, right? There's a difference. Director's cut is just that vision that wasn't able to be out there. The extended version is just that longer version of the movie that you had at the beginning that I didn't think was the best version of the film. And that movie, it was just a funny story. It's just like it got leaked. It was just an error, and Sony shipped the wrong version to the UK. So one day suddenly it's airing in the UK the extended version. I'm seeing all this scene, and I'm like, what is happening? Because I thought they were just going to do a new edition at some point, and now maybe they should do it anyways. But at that point, it was just one of those weird things that I don't think they ever happened. Like UK end up airing an extended version. I was like reading that tweet and looking at it, and I was like, that's actually the extended version. Yeah. But that's not a director's cut. The director's cut is one you've seen.
And I mean, are you okay if that extended cut does come out at some point?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
it's just longer and just drags a little bit more in some points, and it has some stuff that maybe not awesome because, I mean, if it wasn't on my cut, there's a reason for it. It's just like when you watch deleted scenes, there's a reason why they're deleted usually. Yeah. But sometimes it's not that the scene doesn't work. It's just that on the context of the movie, it just drags the pace, or you don't want that at that point, which is emotional. It doesn't track what you wanted. But that's the extended version that I wish it was more publicly available. But I kind of like the fact that it's kind of mysterious and it's kind of out there, and I don't know. I'm sure you can download it. If
somebody in the UK tape it.
Well, that all ties back to the beginning of our conversation, which is this like kind of forbidden fruit and rare cuts and all that other stuff that we pursued when we were kids on VHS. And like that's the stuff that I try to track down. And when at the advent of the internet age, was talk on message boards, it'd be like, "Do you have this cut?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, I got that Hellraiser 4 special edition," even though it's still total crap. So we're a few weeks. Yeah, exactly. So we're a few weeks.
I gotta put some stuff out. Like I've been going through my dailies recently, to my Evil Dead dailies, and I found a lot of crazy shots and stuff that we were doing. We actually did an alternative ending. There was just a reproduction of that final shot in Evil Dead 1 with the camera run through the house and just comes out and Bruce Cameron turns around and screams. And we did the same thing with Jane Levy. It was going to be one of the endings. And I figured the other day, I'm just going to do a GIF with that. just people go crazy about like, where is that from? Where is that from?
Well, the last thing about Evil Dead before we cut through, just because now in retrospect it's fun, because now obviously there's the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV series and they've continued that version of it. But I remember as soon as your movie came out, there was like all these rumblings from insiders.
You guys
on the
were the worst with the PR. Really, like you and Bruce and Sam were like, we were
they
literally at WonderCon thinking we were getting punked by you guys. Like we sat up there. Bruce is like, we're gonna make a bunch of these, and you're like, yeah, maybe we'll do 2, maybe we'll do 3. And Sam's like, I love all of it. And we're like, you know what? They're punking us.
We're just being honest.
I'm just
like having a conversation.
Well, I heard that the intention was to combine franchises at some point. But I mean, how far did you get in a sequel? Because obviously it was successful, so I can imagine that conversation happened. But I also feel like the Ash vs. Evil Dead or Army of Darkness 2, whatever was inevitable. I felt like Sam and Bruce was eventually going to do that. So how far did you get on a sequel? And was there really talk of
There was,
combined?
there definitely was. And but it is kind of connected to what you just said. You said because the first one was successful, it was kind of obvious that you got together. But that's, thank God, and that's actually a good thing for the fans. It's like not Bruce, Sam, Rob Tapper, or me thinks that way. You don't make a movie because you can. You make a movie if you have a good story to tell. And obviously the market will push you, and the studio was pushing it like, we'll make it. We'll put it out there like 2 years later, and it's going to be an audience. There's some like easy math usually when you have a success, certain numbers that you know how much money you can make. But that's not a reason to make a movie, because that's how shitty movies get made every day, right? When you make them for the wrong reasons. And for us, really, the reason was like, do we have a good story? Do we have something that's left to be told on this particular story? And though at first we were like, well, let's find out. Then we would sit down with Rodo. We were like, well, we can do this, we can do that. And one of the things we want to do was like, you know what would be exciting? Let's get Mia to connect with Ash, right? Let's show that this is in the same world. And that's why the cameos at the end of the movie, kind of motivation it was something afterthought that we had while we were making it, and thought like that will open the door for that movie. And that was really what I wanted to do at some point. But then very quickly, the whole idea of doing the show of Ash vs. Evil Dead came about. And we all thought like, well, maybe it's better to just bring Ash back to the world as a character for the new generations and show him to the world why he's so cool. And maybe after that, that's the time to do that, Mia and Bruce getting together again. And that was basically what happened back then. It was just like, let's just give room for the show, and that's what we should do now. And then went away to do that, and it's been super successful. And I'm so proud of those guys doing that and pulling that off. And I'm really good friends with Bruce, and it's just like seeing him back there in the screen, like kicking ass. It's just a blessing. And so maybe now could be a moment to say, well, depending on where the show goes with that story, to say like maybe we connect the feature world with the TV world and we tell that story. But it has to be something that is great. If you're motivated by the fact that you can't do it, it's just like it's got to work with, then usually it's when you end up doing something that is not pure. It's just,
it's organic storytelling versus fan servicing.
Exactly. Well, but it's not even that, because fan servicing for me, it is storytelling. You got to give them something great. Otherwise, you're just abusing them. Or just like you're just taking their money for exchange of something that is not great. And I'm sure it sounds like everybody wants to do it. It's just like this whole Suicide Squad thing. Like they know it's bad and they go like, I don't care. I want to see it. I'm actually might go to see it tonight. So I heard it's terrible, but who cares? Once you're fixated with something, you want it anyways, right? So
the tones are so different, though. I can't imagine those two worlds. Like the TV show is so kind of goofy and fun. And
that's the challenge. That is interesting. That's when there's perhaps a door for something new. If you don't know what it is, that's when it might be great. When you know exactly how it's going to be, it's like, so what's the point?
Just teased a door. Maybe
maybe he's
the door. I'm running with it.
And both were shot in New Zealand, right?
We can do parallel universe like Stranger Things.
That's right. There we
go. That could be good.
Because you shot the feature in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
And then the show, is that just because Tappert has been set up?
Yeah, he did everything there, and he has all his crew there from the Xena times. Everything was down in New Zealand. So
were you on a location or a studio?
No location. We're in the real woods.
Did you actually
again one of those things that everybody was like, what are you doing? We can reproduce exactly this patch of woods inside a soundstage, no problem. It was like, what's the fun on that? Like, you want to be. I'm from that generation that you've seen Heart of Darkness, and you want to go through the hell of that, and like going mad in a wood, like screaming from a megaphone from the top of a tree. That's the fun of making movies, and that's the way I like it, right? Like, and I was telling Rob Tapper, I was like, I'll get to that point where I go like, what, this just be on the stage, right? But now at least I still like the challenge of being on location and all that things that it brings with it, and I think they look more real, the movies, when you do that, right?
Did you construct the cabin, or is that like a pre-existing?
No, we built it. Yeah, we built it from the ground up. We just found a spot in the woods, and we said like, that's where we're going to build our cabin, and we built it.
Is it still
there? And we had another
is
one
it a
that was
Mecca
on the
for fans?
soundstage, but for the interiors.
Is it still there?
No, I think they took it down. They had to take it down because it was kind of a sacred ground for the Maori, so it was kind of we had to build it and just take it down.
Delicately.
There's a horror movie right there.
Do you watch trailers? I'm just curious, because we're talking about fan service, talking about spoilers, and I know for me, I try to avoid them.
He's the only guy I know that didn't watch any of the Evil Dead trailers before going to see them. We're like, you have to see the trailer. It looks
and
so
he
good.
avoids them. Like if you're watching,
I'm
the
starting to do
he'll
that same
avoid
thing. I started to feeling on that, like, and really, if I haven't made my mind, like I'm gonna watch a movie, like Rogue One, I haven't seen nothing.
Yeah,
like I gotta see the movie. There's no way around that. So why would I? Just spoil myself. We watch. I'd rather be surprised.
And with horror films, a pro tip: close your eyes during the Witch trailer, and it's really fucking scary. Like, I sat through so many movies where the trailer started, and I just closed my eyes, and you hear the screaming and goat, and you're like, and then everyone's talking about Black Phillip, and you have no idea what they're talking about, and it's a great feeling. But the reason I ask is a student, I teach film, and a student of mine forced me to watch the Don't Breathe trailer because he's like, it's so good, you have to just watch the trailer. And I'd just seen Green Room and I loved it, and I made them see it. So I sat down, I watched the trailer, and I thought I was instantly sold, wanted to see it. But just as Ryan walked into the room, all I said is, I don't want to know anything, but is there something that's not in the trailer still yet to come, or is it just tense for the whole movie? And that's all I wanted to, that's the only thing I want answered, because I'm going anyway. You've already got my money, but you still want to win me over.
Well, there's, you've seen the film, and there's, I think it's very hard to judge. Like once if you've seen the film and then you watch the trailer, usually you get a feeling like, oh my god, they're showing everything because you know what the movie is. But I tell you, there's so many things that you don't have in any of the trailers that we put out.
Cool.
Because I'm in every meeting where we like talk about trailers, and I approve every trailer that comes out. So I really make sure that there's so many things in the film that we're not spoiling. And there's a new Red Band trailer that came out today.
Yeah, really good.
Just told us.
And that one has so many images and stuff, but it's just so weird and strange that it's very hard for your brain to put together what's going on. It just promises you that a lot of things are going to go down. But again, you've seen the film, so you know what I'm talking about. Nuts. It's just a story. It takes so many twists and turns that there's no way you can predict what's going to happen. Yeah. Look, there's something, when we cut in these trailers and we're showing them, people sometimes bitch about them, like, oh, you spoil. Oh, now I've seen the whole movie. What am I going to see it now? And people say that. I'm like, dude, I've never watched a film that I walked out and goes like, oh, it would have been great if it wasn't because I've seen the trailer. Now I don't like it.
I'd say that
nothing happened.
Quarantine was my only one.
Yeah, but that was a remake.
But you didn't like the movie. You wouldn't like it, but you didn't like it because you've seen a trailer.
I probably wouldn't have liked the movie anyway, but because I saw the trailer, I was just pissed.
But that was the thing. It's like I remember seeing Quarantine. I remember seeing all these other movies, and like even I saw some of the comments on Don't Breathe where they're like, "Oh, they're ruining this part," and it's like, you know what? If you've seen the movie and you've seen the trailer, don't be the first asshole that comes out and goes, all the shit's in the trailer. Because you know what? There's a lot of people who haven't seen it and they don't understand that may or may not be a spoiler. So just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah,
I think a lot of this is more a criticism of modern trailers. Like the way trailers were when we were kids, and the one I always cite is Congo. Every time. Congo is a crap movie, but that trailer gets me hard. Like the trailer is just out of focus shots of a monkey running, and you're like, what is it? I need to see Congo. And then Bruce Campbell pops up and does
so amazing. Sometimes, Elric, anytime Congo could be mentioned, I just see that as a win for the day.
It is a win.
It was big in New Zealand.
Yeah, Congo was big.
I remember the trailer for It's Alive being one of the greatest things I'd ever seen as a kid, and it scared the shit out of me because the teaser was literally just a crib, and it rotated, and then there was a claw sticking out of one side.
That's not the trailer. That's a teaser.
Yeah.
But a lot of those movies had great teasers. That's what we remember. It's not like the trailer for Alien wasn't the egg and the sound. There was a lot more than that. And actually, that's something I've been doing recently. If think about any movie like I don't know, The Exorcist, go watch the trailer. I had some cool trailers even back then. And you watch it and you go like, they spoiled the whole thing.
Yeah.
They show she's possessed. They show how deep she goes. They even show like Father Carr's flying out the window. Like they show the whole thing. But we feel that way because we've seen the movie and we know what's happened, right? So you feel like, oh my God. But the reality is that if you haven't, it's just promised a lot.
Were they maybe shorter?
Like
maybe I'm wondering if they were the actual trailers were shorter length because now they're pretty long.
No, they were long, like
super long. They showed The Shining and they showed Rosemary's Baby at the New Bev when we went to go see something, and The Shining is just the gush of blood coming out, and a slow crawl of just.
And he's Kubrick, so he can kind of say what he wants the trailers of that to be.
But that lasted a bit. It lasted a bit. Okay. And The Omen was another one that was just like, holy fuck! They just showed every kill.
Well, what about the Friday the 13th one?
Oh, the Friday the 13th,
a number each kill. So you're right, but I think it's also something to do with probably on my end getting older and getting less pleasures from things.
Exactly.
So if I can,
that's true. I
suddenly I'm Larry David. Yeah, it's okay, but I mean it.
I completely agree. Yeah,
it's like everything's just a little less pleasurable, and movies are part of that. There's Viagra. There's all these problems. I need some Viagra for movies. Viagra for movies is not watching trailers.
This is your get off my lawn moment.
But I think it's valid.
I completely agree. Like that's what I'm really trying to do, and believe me, it's the trailers you've seen so far is just the tip of the iceberg of what the story is. Like, this is one of those that you never know how deep the rabbit hole goes until you really start getting into the movie. It gets to a point that you think you know, and when you think you know, just push it forward, and you go like, oh, wait, what's going on? And I guess mostly is, tell me if you disagree, but I think mostly is because there's no good guys. Like even in the trailer, that's clear. And because there's no good guys, there's not a clear moral ending that you know should happen. I mean, when Hollywood gives you a good guy and a bad guy fighting, you know how it's going to end. Like, because morally, you know who should win. So, and Hollywood always give you the morally correct ending usually, most of the times, right? So the trick was to go back to something that I didn't invent it. Hitchcock did that in every fucking movie he did. Nobody was good. They were all like bad people. Like think about
Janet
Psycho.
Leigh,
Janet Leigh, she's stealing this money
robbery,
from this guy that's gonna buy a house for his daughter.
Jimmy
Jimmy
Stewart's basically a rapist in Vertigo. Like
he's
crazy,
a psychopath.
dressed up like this dead person that I helped kill.
He's forcing this woman to dress like this woman he used to love and change his hair. He's obsessed with it. Like he's a douchebag.
I like to think of it as pre-necromantic. Basically the same.
Totally. Stranger on a train. Like everybody's bad, right? And what that does morally, you go like, oh shit, who should win here? It's like if I tell you there's two characters fighting at the climax of a movie. One of them is a pedophile that is really in rehab, and the other one is a banker that like rip everybody from their savings, but have a lot of conflict with that. Like who's gonna win?
Yeah.
You don't know. Like it really depends of what's worse. You just know, and you kind of understand both of them. You kind of feel that the fact that the pedophile is really someone in the past, and he's really trying not to do it ever again. So you kind of empathize with. So you can empathize with anybody, right? Game of Thrones has shown us that. Like, you can empathize with anybody, and the key is to do that, and to do it with people that are not like saints. So you get the audience to really create suspense, not just in the scenes, but in the movie, because nobody knows like how this is supposed to end. Like, I don't know. I want to know. Please, movie, tell me. Right?
Well, as a storyteller too, it's about kind of the efficiency with which you're able to make the audience side with that person who might have gone off their moral compass. You bring up Game of Thrones. It took us a while to get on like either Cersei's side or anybody's side who's like an asshole in that show. But with you, and especially Don't Breathe, I feel like, it's just very efficient and tight, and and you're immediately you can identify. Okay, you know what? These people are all off their moral compass, but I like her, or I like him, or whatever. So
he also brought the gray area to Evil Dead by making the lead character somebody who's there for rehab reasons and drug addicts, and all the friends are really worried, and they're interjecting in a way that could be perceived as "fuck you guys, get out of my life." And I think that creates a heroine that you're a little more invested. I think also
she's because she's not at the beginning. She's not very grateful to everybody. Like, oh, thank God everybody came to do this for me. I mean, she's a real person. And people I met that are on that stage, they're like douchebags to everybody around them. Like, they don't like be patronized by people. They're like, you're a drug addict, you better get clean. So that's her attitude. But then eventually at the end, when she's like shoving that chainsaw down Demon's throat, everybody's cheering for her, even though she was a monster. That scares you. I haven't seen it before. But again, like, you know what I mean? Like, it gets on that climax of that movie, everybody's cheering for her. Like, empathy is like the key, and it's really tricky to do. But at the end of the day, I think we're all capable to empathize with everybody, and even with the antagonist on my movie, like whoever that is, you really get there's ways in even to empathize with him, and those otherwise it's not a real character, right?
Well, guys, this has been a great chat.
Yeah.
Don't Breathe comes out August
26th.
Yeah.
And this looks like an audience
2 weeks
picture.
from
Like,
now.
I'm
It's an audience movie.
I want to see this one in the
see it
theater.
with a packed
definitely.
house.
Do you already know what's? From what you can say, do you already know what you're lined up to do next, or are you still trying to create that next auteurist?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I mean, we have a few things. One thing, there's a movie we're writing for Warner Brothers that we'll see what happens with that. I mean, I'm excited about that. We'll see what it is. And then there's like a couple of TV shows actually that we're working on, that we're creating, and we're excited about that. And hopefully, you'll know more about it soon. But then, I always take my time with these things. It's just I don't like. I mean, there's a saying here in Hollywood, like, you should get your next movie before the previous one comes out. That leads to disaster. That's a recipe for bad movies. But a lot of people do it. I mean, because the money rules, and if you what you're after is like making a lot of money, yes, you should do that, because that's the time you get paid the most. But I cannot do it, dude. It's just like I really have to make movies that I'm proud of, and if I have to, starve to death by waiting for that movie, I'll do it. I couldn't live with myself if I make a movie that I'm not proud of, that ain't good, that I cannot tell like. And usually I'm not proud of my movies. Usually I hate them, but it's just at least I know that I make them for the right reasons, and I go like, okay, good. Like, I make all the decisions that I know are, goes with my morals, and they weren't because of the money, or weren't because as a stepping stone to get whatever thing. Another thing, all the things that you hear all the time in Hollywood, I really make an exercise every morning to not do. I just make the movies that I believe I will die to see in the theater, and nobody else is making them. So I go like, okay, so I have to make that film, and that's really my single and simple motivation to make stories, and so far it has worked, and we'll hopefully I'll be able to keep making them.
Very cool.
Excellent.
Very cool. Well, Fede, thanks for coming on, man.
Much.
Yeah, really
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Yeah, looking forward to the movie, man.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.